Okay. It's been, as usual, a little bit difficult actually starting the stream. This time, a little bit more so than normal. And I'm not going to go into all the details on all the issues that I ran into getting this thing started. The one thing I will say, though, is right as I was about to start the stream about an hour ago, my headphones died. And then I had to get a new pair of headphones. And then, that was just kind of frustrating. So it took me a little bit longer than normal. I'm going to try to get this relatively underway before long. I, generally speaking, don't want to spend a ton of time going over stuff. It's also interesting. I forgot that Stormwind actually looked different for a while after the whole Deathwing thing. Haven't really done a lot of exploring. Because I'm so used to, like, the updated version now with, like, the little Anduin, or I guess it's not Anduin, but whatever his name is, monument over there, variant, that's the word I'm looking for. And one thing that I'm curious to test, so I'm not starting the timer just yet, is I believe that druids can just go straight to Moonglade, so I'm not going to turn them this quest. Now, normally, if you're not a druid, you would just pick up the quest on the Warchief's command board, or whatever it's called for Alliance, Heroes call board. And you can see I can grab this stuff, vashj'ir, and Heroes call Mount Hygel. Cool. The portal to Moonglade is... I guess it's over here, interestingly enough. So, this is, I guess, what it would normally look like. If you're not doing this, yeah, you would take that portal, I guess, just like the Horde has one in the Valley of Wisdom. But what I'm going to try to do, because theoretically this may be faster, is I believe if you just directly teleport to Moonglade, so like theoretically before Cataclysm actually launches, if you do this ahead of time, you head over to Moonglade and you just sit here. And I guess maybe non-druids could do this too, because there's nothing stopping you from running to Moonglade. You just don't have the Moonglade portal. But yeah, like, let me turn off Leatrix Plus so it doesn't... I see. So it looks like I would need to... Yeah, I can't continue it if I pick it up from the board, because it wants me to talk to the NPC and then go through the portal. That seems like it's a necessary step. But if I were to abandon Heroes Call Mount Hygel, I do know that there's a quest here. Ah, yes. So you can skip that initial quest. And the Heroes Call quests only give 2,000 experience, which, I mean, if we can see here, I need 1,600,000 something experience to level up. So the amount of time that it's going to take you to grab this off the board, go to the Moonglade portal, and actually do the quest is not actually worth it. And I only noticed this because while I was training my druid spells, I realized that I could pick up this quest. But, like I said, theoretically, this could work for everybody. I believe all classes could actually, theoretically, start right here, pick up this quest, and skip 30 seconds or something. But obviously, even a 5-second time save for the very start of Hygel is going to be really nice. Assuming that is what you're going with, but if you want to get a head start, pull ahead of the competition, stuff like this is kind of necessary. I should also note that I'm going to be testing additional potential ways to save time within Hygel before launch. On the topic of this stream, though, this is maybe going to be the final 80 to 85 testing run that I live stream. I'm not entirely sure. I'm definitely going to do a lot of other testing in my free time. I've already done a little bit, and the thing is, like, obviously setting aside time to do one of these is really tricky, and I have, of course, mop remix and stuff to do over the next few days. So what I will probably do, if anything, is if I do a full, really good test run, like 80 to 85 practice run that goes really well. Like, I get it done in, I don't know, 8 hours. Spitballing. I don't know if I'll actually be able to do it that fast. I think it's possible. Maybe even faster. And I record that, like, off-stream or something like that. I might post the recording or something like that. Follower goal. Does Twitch automatically put follower goals for me? There's, like, this big confetti thing. I definitely didn't enable any of that myself, but apparently it set one for me and I reached it, so cool, I suppose. But yeah, if I get like one of those really good testing runs, then I might upload it. Might not, we'll see. Yeah, it must be like that. I don't know. I definitely didn't play around with that stuff. But yeah, I thought about doing like a Protection Warrior 80 to 85 run, and it, like, at this point, the main reason why I really wanted to stream this one is just because I want to showcase the full Alliance route. And while it is very similar to Horde, the main focus is going to be on the vashj'ir intro and Twilight Highlands, because that is considerably different. The rest is like, whatever. It is mostly the same. There are really not any major differences. Just see why I'm getting pinged. Yeah. But yeah, I want to make sure that we show that so that when I make my guide and I have, you know, the Alliance route, I can basically say, hey, if you want a full example of how to do this, go check out these videos, something like that. Makes my life a little bit easier in the future. But any additional testing, I can just record in my free time and then use that footage in, what's it called? In the video, the guide itself. Anywho, let me get buffed up, real quick. So just some, basic explanatory stuff for talents and whatnot. I'm playing Feral. That is something I already said. I would imagine that Feral is the best leveling spec. It's obviously not Resto, and casters are generally not amazing for leveling. The thing about Feral is you could play either Bear or Cat or both, because they all use the same talents. I am going with a Bear slanted talent setup. There's a few fairly decent Cat talents that I'm just not taking, because I don't expect to spend a lot of time in Cat form. I would imagine that if you really, really, really wanted to be efficient with Druid leveling, you would be playing both and kind of weaving between the two different forms continuously. I will try to use Cat form on a single target, but I'm going to be completely honest, it's not something that I am very familiar with, so I can't say how much I'll be doing it. I'll try my best. I am not as experienced with Feral Druid. The last time I played Feral Druid was at the end of TBC Classic, at least the last time I played Classic Feral Druid. I haven't really touched it at all during Wrath, so I'm not super familiar with a lot of the changes, and while I've looked over the abilities, I've obviously set up my bars and stuff. Not everything is incredibly intuitive to me, and we're going to be figuring things out as we go along. It's not like Death Knight or Paladin, where I'm very familiar with how they actually work. But I at least wanted to test it, figured that would be kind of fun, and we'll kind of see how we go. For talents, yeah, you can see here, the only really big ones I'm not taking is I'm not taking Feral Aggression, so slightly less Ferocious Bite damage. Not a huge deal, I think. Basically just going mostly with Bear. One moment. For glyphs, I would say most of this is relatively self-explanatory. Increasing the duration of your main offensive cooldown is duh. Increasing the duration of one of your main damage abilities is duh. Now, the thing about Glyph of Lacerate over here, this is only 5% increased critical strike chance. This honestly is not that good, and I think that there is a chance that Glyph of Moonfire would actually be better. Now, in this version of Bear, you cannot actually use Moonfire in Bear form. But the thing is, we don't really have any good pulling options, and in a lot of cases, using Moonfire to round up mobs and then pull them to you is just good. This is something that I did a lot in vanilla, like hardcore and stuff like that, because I did play a ton of Feral Druid in Classic era and like hardcore and stuff like that. And a lot of times I would pull a bunch of mobs with Moonfire, then shift into Bear form. And because you have like Burst Rage with Enrage and stuff, that actually did a ton of damage. And while we do have Feral Fairy Fire now as a way to pull ranged mobs, it's not quite as good. Moonfire's 40-yard range. This is 30-yard range. You can increase the range of Fairy Fire to 40 yards if you take this glyph. But there's a lot of other good glyphs in the major section that make it not really worth doing. So I'm going to be trying to do this while leveling. I think it's going to be better. But that being said, I don't necessarily know enough to say whether or not this is worth running over Lacerate. And keep in mind, this is purely for leveling, right? There's probably going to be some options I take here that you're like, but this other thing is really good for raiding. Well, we're not raiding. We're doing leveling. Things are always subject to change. But we'll see. If I find that, like, midway through the leveling process, Moonfire is doing a ridiculous amount of my damage, then I will just switch the glyph. I can do that out in the world. But I'm just explaining why I've chosen not to go with that just yet. For major glyphs here, there's a few good ones. Feral Charge is nice, but personally, I'm opting to go with Glyph of Maul. This definitely feels mandatory for leveling, having your, in this case, main Rage Spender. You have, like, other Rage things that you could use. There's a lot of abilities that, like, consume Rage here. So, it's kind of like Maul is what I use after I've done everything else. And I don't know how much I'll be using this, but I do know I will be using it sometimes, and having it hit additional targets will be good, especially for 2-target cleave. This is going to be very nice. And Glyph of Thorns, yeah, the more AoE cleave, the better. Usually a good rule of thumb for leveling, which is why I'm going with that. Glyph of Thorns makes it so this is now a 25-second cooldown and 20-second duration, and that's just good. That means that I can use it on pretty much every single pull. And I don't exactly know how good this version of Thorns is. The last time I really played Classic Druid, Thorns was just a maintenance buff. It was like Mark of the Wild. You put it up and it gave you passive damage. So I don't know how much damage I should expect from this, but guess we'll find out. And I figure this is better than the other options. And then I would say the last one isn't super important. I mainly don't want Frenzied Regeneration to actually consume my rage. This is like more of a major CD that I just want to use for free. So I figured this is just better overall. And then if I use it and I have a heal rolling on me, like for a lot of big pulls, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll shift into regular form, pop a regrowth on myself, then shift back into bear form, and I'll have that ticking on me. The duration on regrowth is really short in this version. So I guess for hots like that, I would probably want to go with Rejuve. And then shift into bear form, and that way it gives me a little bit of free healing for the first few instances of damage that I take. So, in that case, if I know that I'm going to do that, Frenzied Regen, it's okay. This is more of a dungeon thing, obviously, though. But I would say that the loss of rage consumption is, in my opinion, better than having slight utility stuff with, like, Feral Charge, whatever. Because Feral Charge is already a 15-second cooldown. I don't really think making it a 14-second cooldown is going to have any major impact, personally. And I'm not going to be using Ferocious Bite nearly enough to make this worthwhile. And for minor glyphs, Dash, this is a no-brainer, more movement speed. Aquatic Form, there are multiple portions within this route, especially, vashj'ir, right? I'm not going to be doing a lot of vashj'ir. I might do it towards the very end of the stream just to showcase the Alliance introduction up until the point where it connects with Horde, just so you can see the differences between both factions. But obviously for vashj'ir, this is crazy. And even in Hyjal, there's multiple segments where you have to go underwater, namely the part with Tortola. You have to go under there and fight some of the little mobs, the faceless guys underwater. So it is definitely useful. Trying to think if there's any other situations. I know Uldum, there's a few underwater places. So Glyph of Aquatic Form, basically, it's just good value for Cataclysm leveling, but it's just good value for leveling in general. And most of the other stuff here isn't super important. I think for dungeons, Glyph of Challenging Roar would be nice. In fact, I should probably at least put Challenging Roar on my bars in case I do dungeons. It doesn't matter for leveling, duh, because it's an AoE taunt, but I'll throw this here in case I do queue into a dungeon. That'll be nice. this can be maybe okay for dungeons. I would say it's probably better than Glyph of Mark of the Wild, but because I'm not really benefiting from any of the other glyphs for solo leveling, I'm just taking mana cost reduction. Very minor benefit, but it is at least a benefit. Hello, I don't know how to pronounce that. Wickendeer? If I said that correctly. Dash and Worgen Racial together probably make Bear walk really fast and funny looking. Well, Dash is only usable in cat form. I do have a macro, which I'd recommend everybody gets because, let's say, if I just put Dash on my bars here, you can see that I'm pressing it and it says you can't do that yet. But this Dash, well, it seems grayed out. It's actually a macro. I have to double tap it to get it to work correctly. But it's a macro that shifts me into cat form, and then if I double tap it, it presses Dash again. So for a lot of abilities like that, if you plan on shifting in and out, you want to have macros that let you do that. Now, there's like some very fancy Druid macros that you can do where it's like you can only shift out of form in like specific cases. Basically, it's meant to protect you from accidentally shifting out of bear form. Because let's say I have this dash macro and I'm actively tanking mobs and I fat finger shift E. Now I'm in cat form and there's a chance that I just die. So if you are like really seriously trying to play Druid at endgame, that is stuff that you should look into. I'm not really concerned about it just for leveling, but I know that in TBC Classic, I had a few macros like that. And even in retail, there are macros like that where shifting out of form stuff, you have like built-in protection and it makes you like hit an extra key just to make sure that you don't fuck it up and die. But having stuff like that just baseline to make it so you can easily shift into the required form to use that ability is nice. In retail, it does that automatically. If you press dash, it'll shift you into cat form and you don't need to do that. In Classic, even in Cataclysm, it still doesn't do that. So you can see, I'll just show you my very basic macro. Just dismount, cast cat form, etc. I also have one for Prowl. So if I think I'm going to need to go into stealth really quickly, same thing, cat form, Prowl. Just means that I don't need to then hit a separate keybind and hit like Control 2, then Shift G. Now I'm just pressing the same button twice. Just a little bit of convenience. It's short for Wicked Engineer, so Wicked Engineer, or Wicked Near. I see. Someone who's new to WoW, you played in Wrath, but hardly counts. Thank you for all the information you put out. It's very appreciated. No problem. I'm glad you find it helpful. Oh, what else? I think that kind of covers all of the important stuff, really. I'll start the timer. I'll just preemptively put tank here just so I don't need to do that and potentially forget. I have no idea if I'm going to get into Cataclysm dungeons. The reality of the previous few runs is that whenever I queued for dungeons, there was just nobody running it. I did do those streams relatively late at night. Right now it is 6:45 p.m. my time, so it's not super late. There's a chance, and I will be queuing for those right out of the gate, but I'm not really stressing about it. What I will say is that if anybody watching this, both on Twitch or in the future, has beta and wants to help test dungeon stuff, shoot me a DM on Discord. If you want to queue right now, that's great, but I am looking to put together a group just to test 80 to 82 dungeon leveling, which is where it's really good. Questing, generally speaking, pulls ahead after that, but there is very much a case to be made within those first 2 levels for dungeon spamming. And I want to at least test that to see what the time is relative to just high gel questing. And that's something that I don't know if I'll stream it just because it's one of those things that I don't want to like set a stream time ahead of time and then like, you know, maybe somebody has a conflict and I'm juggling 5 people's schedules. Don't really want to worry about that, but I will test it on my own. And I will, of course, include those results should I manage to figure this out in the updated leveling guide whenever that's done. A lot of those safe macros on retail have been nerfed by Blizzard. I did hear about that, yeah. I wasn't going to mention that, obviously, because this is, Classic and not retail. But yes, I have actually been looking into playing Guardian Druid in Season 4. It's the main tank that I've been gearing up alongside my current main, which is Brewmaster. And I've been enjoying Guardian Druid, but I did look into the Druid Discord and saw that a lot of those macros were broken. Obviously, I would assume that that is not intended by Blizzard, which is why I still mentioned it here, because it would be really stupid if they just broke the safe macros, because that's like kind of a staple of Druid tanking. But yeah. Wait, you can change a setting where you make shifting work, where you won't unshift but the old safe macro has been disabled. Ah, interesting. Yeah, I'll have to look into that. For now, I think, especially for Classic, this is all I'm going to do. And I've been like, the way that I've been approaching Guardian on retail is I've just kind of been slowly gearing it up along, along the way. I'm not in any major rush to get it caught up, because I'm probably not even going to switch to Guardian until my guild fully clears all Mythic Awakened raids. We killed Awakened Mythic Farok last week, or I guess it's still this week, because it's only Sunday. So we killed Farok, and we almost got Sarkareth. We got, to phase 3, but we didn't have time, so he should definitely die the next time Aberrus rolls around, because we have, 10 additional item levels. And I would assume Razageth dies next week. So I'm hoping that once we've gotten all of the, faded raids done and nobody's really concerned about, getting their portals and stuff, that I'll be able to play Druid because, who gives a shit at that point? If the bosses are falling over anyway, does it really matter if we have monk buff or not? So that's kind of my hope. We'll see. I think it's intended... They said it's to combat wrath botting. That is a really weird thing to change to combat botting. Especially if that, really negatively impacts actual players. That being said, it's not the first time Blizzard has made the game worse just to combat bots, because I guess it's really difficult for them. I don't fucking know. I understand that botting is a difficult issue, but I will say it sucks when they ruin the player experience in ways like that just to quote-unquote combat botting, and it doesn't really make any discernible difference. Anyways, I think... Let me just double-check real quick. Okay, I just wanted to make sure, because there's... I know my dad did order food, so I wanted to make sure that it hadn't arrived yet, and I could start at least the initial part of the run. Alright, but I think we're good to go, so I'm just going to walk up here. This is, I believe, if you're doing Hyjal, what you would want to do, which is why I'm going to start the timer here. Because you would basically just hit start timer, pick up the quest. My Leatrix Plus is disabled because I was doing some testing earlier, but we can quickly enable that. There we go. Automate quests. And you would immediately go to Hyjal. Now, the thing is, as you can see, this says quest complete. I talked about this in the previous run. I think that there is a chance that the moment you enter this, you could take a Warlock summon straight to Hyjal. Obviously, if you're doing this within the first seconds of the expansion going live, you wouldn't be able to get a Warlock there immediately. But one thing that I am curious about is whether I could Warlock summon myself to the Hyjal portal as soon as I went through this, and then take it and go through and skip all this RP. Because this RP is fairly lengthy. It's like a minute or so long. And just getting a few minutes ahead of the pack really, really, really saves you a lot of time. I say this every single expansion launch, and it's always true. It's the reason why in Shadowlands, using the little couch cushions to skip the Frostborn RP saved 30 seconds, but made it extremely easy for me to get ahead. And it's why stuff like the Meteor, the Falling Flame, to get to shore in Dragonflight was really important. And then, of course, in my case, the server crashed. But at least in Shadowlands, when I did that little cushion trick and saved 15-20 seconds over everybody else, I ended up being the first one in the Maw. I got so far ahead, smooth sailing, and then by the time I was in Oribos, I had friends who were only on the very first Maw quest because they just couldn't get tags. Every little bit counts. So yeah, this will still be true here. That being said, due to the way that Cataclysm works, and really old expansions in general, you don't need to level through it the entire way. Stuff like that trick is more important in retail. Just fly here. That trick is much more important in retail because we need to do the entire campaign. Because if you just skip ahead to Azure Span, you just won't be able to do the quest there. It's, just locked out. So pre-questing is less of a thing in retail, as most people know, but it is a very viable option in this version of the game. One thing that I really don't like about Druid based on my limited testing of it, is that for the most part, there is also... Why am I at full rage? Hold on. Am I just actually generating more rage than I'm spending? Because, like, I thought I was pressing my rage buttons. I guess I am going to be spending Maul, or pressing Maul a lot as a rage dump, because I didn't realize my generation would be so ludicrously high, and that was outside of cooldowns. Okay. Wow. I'm used to being fairly rage-starved on a Druid. Where are these quest items? Just throw them there. Can't use this while shapeshifted. Wait, can you actually... Hold on. Okay, I can gather, like, the berries and stuff in flight form. So this is kind of one of those retail things. Oh, did it bug out? No. You have to be within range. Okay, that's good to know. So if you... Oh, fuck. Oh, okay, never mind. I guess it was just delayed. Oh, shit. The NPC helped me out. Alright. Let's activate multiple fairy dragons at once. Do this. Where'd the other fairy dragon go? Is it that one that I activated? Oh, there it is. Oh, they both spawned on top of me. So I guess it actually has nothing to do with... Okay, so Maul's off the GCD, it looks like. Ah. Interesting. And I have one more fairy dragon. Yeah, this feels pretty good. It's interesting, because I have been looking into 1 to 80 speedrunning, obviously. It's been not, like, top of my priority list in terms of really putting together the route, but my main concern right now is trying to find which class would be best. Oh yeah, so I can just... Ooh, that's sweet. I can just weave Maul in with other stuff. Why doesn't Maul work like that in retail? That's actually kind of nice. Huh. And then let's grab you there. And lacerate. Now let me double check. Does Maul... Yeah, Maul always hits one additional target with that glyph. I wasn't sure if it was only during Berserk or something. No, it seems like it's a constant buff. Okay. This feels pretty solid for AoE. That's a big upgrade. Thank you. Where did we end up ordering from?
Tommy's.
Ah, cool.
Remember, if that's the one you don't like.
Yeah, we'll see. I appreciate it. What was I saying? Yeah, oh yeah, so I've looked into optimal classes for Cataclysm 1 to 80 speed leveling. Right, I forgot. If, there's nobody clearing this out ahead of time. You actually need to kill these mobs, which is a little bit unfortunate. It's kind of the case where this might actually be a situation where somebody ends up catching up to you on launch day just because you need to kill the mobs and they can just swoop in and use the quest item. Not a huge time loss, but something worth noting. I wonder if Druids could have used that in flight form. I didn't bother trying. Probably should have. You know what? I am going to try it. Might as well. Entire point of these runs is to do science. But yeah, I suspect right now that either Paladin or Druid is going to be the fastest speed leveling class. Fuck, of course there's There's a horn. Now, to get this to work properly, because I can't use it while shapeshifting, so if this works, I would need to hop out of flight form, use the item, and then immediately shift back into flight form, which could be a little bit tricky. It would mean I actually want to fly up into the air like so. Okay, it does work. Yeah, it does work. Well, that's tricky timing, though. I'm not going to wait for the mobs to respawn, but in theory, they could aggro onto me while I'm falling through the sky. So there would be a very, very tight window where I could activate the thing and immediately shift back into flight form before I get into combat. And I guess, I mean, at like, worst case scenario, it might actually be faster to just use the item and then run away, just dash out of combat. That's not, like, the worst idea ever. You know, like I said before, I have to play around with it just to see. Crap. Accidentally hit the ground. Trying to... Okay. Another thing is, a few people asked me about the possibility of doing, what's it called, like Wrath of the Lich King stuff to farm experience early on. And I would need to look into that, but I've heard conflicting responses from, I've heard conflicting information about whether or not that actually works. Like, apparently right now on the beta, it works where, like, you can do certain Wrath content, namely Halls of Lightning, and it gives really good experience. But there's sources I've read from, like, original Cataclysm saying that that doesn't work and that it got, like, hotfixed by Blizzard or something like that. So, I don't know if that's a viable leveling method, but enough people have asked me at this point that I will probably at least test it just to see. Yeah. I really need to figure out what the... Yeah, just hitting Maul's definitely not good. I only want to do that while my bleeds are stacked up. So I think on low targets, I just stack Lacerate up on everything. And then I go to town. So let's shift here. And then just get Lacerate built up. And then I'm not going to use Maul until I'm capped on Rage. Okay, now I can use Swipe. It feels kind of weird, because Bear has, like... Oh, my Lacerate stacks fell off. Bear has, like, this ramp-up time, where I know that when I get Thrash, it's probably going to feel a little bit better. But right now, it's, like, a little bit janky, because I'm... In order to get my bleed bonus, which I... How does that work again? I know there's something where it's like, when I have bleeds on my target, things hit harder. Effects which increase bleed damage also increase maul damage. Is it just that, or do I have, like, a passive? Let me just double check. It just increases your attack power. Gives me absorbs, etc., etc. It might just be that the abilities themselves have that modifier. Well, I know bleeds are a debuff I apply. I'm not saying, like, how do I get bleeds? Sorry if that was unclear. Obviously, yeah, I apply bleeds through, like, Lacerate and stuff. What I was unsure about is how the scaling on my abilities. I think it is just... Yeah, it's just that both of these abilities scale off bleeds. So, Maul does more damage based on my bleed damage. Mangle does more damage, or 30% additional damage to targets that are bleeding, etc. And now this is one of the good Druid quests. If I get hit by that fireball. I need to fly out of range of this guy. Yeah, this is nice. This is one of those situations where, like, even in retail, this is still amazing value. But you can see here, yeah, this flame color, I can still pick it up. But stuff like that, that might be tricky with the whole skip that I just demonstrated earlier, because mobs like this can still interrupt you if you're a little bit too close to the ground, but I should be fine. There we go. Definitely faster on a druid than any other class, so. For that reason, I expect druids to be really good at speed leveling. The only thing is, it's like, druids are really, really strong in retail. Because of that, and because Bear Druid is one of the best AoE classes. But the reality of AoE in retail is that I would say there are a lot of specs that realistically are comparable in terms of how much AoE damage they deal. Because if you look at my leveling tier list for retail, basically everything that's in A or S tier is roughly the same in terms of how efficiently it can kill things in an AoE setting. Some are going to be a little bit faster than others, like, don't get me wrong, Monk, for instance, is just really insane at cleaving down mobs, but, like, so is Prot Paladin, and I didn't even put Prot Paladin in S tier. I'd actually say Prot Paladin is better at AoEing down mobs in retail than Guardian Druid, but obviously Guardian Druid has much better mobility and stuff. And that means that because so many things can, you know, AoE down mobs in roughly the same amount of time, mobility and just general utility for leveling ends up being much more important in determining what is the fastest leveling spec in retail, which is why things like druids being able to interact with objects in flight form becomes so extremely important. Because that is a massive time save, and they can kill things just as quickly as anybody else. But in the context of Classic, that's really not the case. There's a lot of classes that just have extremely good AoE damage relative to everything else. Some classes in Cataclysm, and especially in older versions of WoW, but it's like a little bit better at this point. But, oh my god, they just can't do AoE. Like, at all. Their AoE is shit. Also, forgot, but I should be queuing for Cataclysm dungeons. I remembered now. Okay. Wow, that is loud. My headphones feel much louder. Mobs like that, they can't pop you out of flight form. At least I don't think so in Classic. In Retail, you can't be dismounted, period, as a tank. And I believe that extends to flight form. Or in Retail, definitely extends to flight form. I believe for all classes in Retail, that extends to flight form. In Classic, I am honestly not sure. Okay, walk over here. Might as well just AoE these two mobs, because I'm pretty sure I'm going to be stuck in combat with them anyway. But I should have started killing them before the living bomb went off, but I didn't really think about it until after. Oh, got missed. Alright. And then we turn this in. What's it called? I don't need any of this stuff. Hello? Malfearing? Oh, it's this mob that gives a quest. I couldn't see the fucking exclamation mark because just so bright in that area. But yeah, there are a lot of classes that will just not be good for leveling in Classic. A lot of specs too. And it's also kind of weird because in Retail, most specs have at least one solid AoE ability by like level 10-ish. And level 10 is within the first 30 minutes of the leveling process. It's super early. You're not even going to be doing AoE pulls before level 10 regardless. Some get their AoE ability at like level 11. Like I think monks tend to get their AoE ability one level late because it's at the very top of their class tree. But either way, they get it extremely early into the leveling process, so they can already do AoE pulls extremely efficiently very early on. It's not really a concern. But in in Classic, I looked through all the different classes, and based on what I saw, most specs, the earliest... Oh, fuck. The earliest they get their AoE ability is, like, level 15 or level 20. That's where a lot of them get it. Like, I think Paladin gets Divine Storm somewhere around level 20-something. It's like level 23, 25 in that range. I forget exactly when. You don't get it super late, but it's not immediate. And I forget what the other specs that I was looking at were, but there were a few that got their leveling, or their AoE abilities fairly late into the process, and some it takes a really long time to get any consistent AoE. And that really, really hurts you in terms of leveling speed. That's going to make it really slow. And what that also means by association is that classes which can multi-dot suddenly become the best AoE levelers pre-getting their AoE ability. Because the next best thing to pressing, you know, I don't know, Swipe or Thrash or whatever, which obviously Thrash you don't get until really late in this version of WoW. But the next best thing is just dotting up a bunch of things with, as I said earlier, like, should be using Darkflight here. But, you know, Moonfire, I mentioned before, which I'm not utilizing as much as I should be. But in retail, we can obviously see that Moonfire does an insane amount of damage. That is partially due to the help of Galactic Guardian, but even still, it is very, very, very strong. Just because multi-dotting up multiple targets and cleaving them down is very powerful. And I've already tested that a little bit, because I leveled a Druid up to level 5, and one of the weird things with power leveling in this version of WoW is... I can't remember when I mentioned this. I think I might have either talked about this in my Discord or I mentioned it in the last stream. Either way, there is definitely a fall-off point where you stop gaining experience if there's a high level, even tagging the mobs. So a lot of people will say, oh, well, if you just do like a 2x4 farm or something of that nature and let somebody else, you know, kill the mobs after you've tagged them, that does not work. I've tried that. If a high-level character in Cataclysm does any damage whatsoever to a mob that is gray to them, the other players will gain 0 experience from killing it. Which means that in order to boost in this version of WoW, you need to have characters at specific breakpoints that can kill the mobs efficiently. So in order to effectively boost the character up to level 5, now, mind you, level 5 is not hard to reach. It's like 30 minutes of concerted questing tops. But you would need another level 5 character who is XP locked with, like, you know, Twinked Out Heirlooms, etc. And the best that I've found to do that is actually Druid. Because at really low levels, pretty much up until like level 10 or 15, Druids are kings of AoE farming because Moonfire on multiple mobs just does a lot of damage. So you can just do exactly what I described earlier, Moonfire up like 5, 10 targets, and then at really low levels, honestly, with heirlooms, things just kind of die to the Moonfire damage, and you can just keep kiting. But then at level 10, you just shift into bear form, and you kind of tank it out, heal yourself if needed, and just keep reapplying Moonfire, and it just rots mobs way faster than really anything else that you can get. So I suspect that for that reason, Druids will be one of the best options for leveling. The only problem is, on Alliance side, what are the Druid races that you can pick? Well, it's Night Elf or Worgen. And while the Worgen starting zone isn't bad, Worgen and Goblin objectively just have bad leveling efficiency in their starting zones. So if you're really trying to do a race agnostic 1 to 80 speedrun, or 1 to 85, really 1 to 80 is all that matters because it's kind of separate after the fact. It's like how I always separate current expansion when I'm doing my regular speedruns. But if you're doing a speedrun, starting from level 1, Night Elf on Alliance is effectively mandatory if you wanted to play a Druid, because Worgen's the only other option, and it's just not good to do the Worgen starting zone. And I don't believe that they have enough of an advantage over Night Elves that they would make up for like the hour time loss in the long run. Problem with Night Elves is you have really the worst starting zone for Night Elves. It is not good. Teldrassil, it's not like horrible. It's not like Teldrassil itself is extremely inefficient. Oh my god, it's so bad. But the thing about leveling as an Alliance character, and this was already kind of true in Original Classic, but it's even more so the case now in Cataclysm, if you are at all familiar with my retail route, is that Elwyn Forest is fucking nuts. Elwyn Forest has basically remained unchanged since Vanilla WoW, and it is extremely efficient if you are routing it properly. And what that means is that humans are just at a distinct advantage when starting at low levels because they are already in the best starting zone. And on top of that, while this is not necessarily the case as much in Classic because certain zones are a little bit better. Oh shit, I forgot about that. I need to update my estimated Cataclysm route after the fact. I forgot to include Loch Modan. But outside of Loch Modan, which I don't think you go to until... What level is it, Loch Modan? Here, let me... Questy... all low-level quests. So what level is Loch Modan? We'll be able to see by looking at this. It is 10 to 15. So I suspect actually, yeah, that Loch Modan would probably be your best option for 10 to 15, which does give dwarves and gnomes a little bit of an advantage, but humans can get there without too much trouble. There is a lot of additional walking, because normally in my retail routes, I like to do Loch Modan later on when you have flying, because there's a lot of distance. And of course, in that context, Loch Modan is insanely efficient. So there is definitely a case to be made that when you do not have flying and Loch Modan is at really low levels, it is actually not more efficient than Westfall in the context of Cataclysm Classic. I'll have to test that. That's something I'm really just not sure about. But what I do know for a fact is that Red Ridge, which I believe is level 15 onwards, is really good at the start. We use that still. That's not Red Ridge. That's also not Red Ridge. Red Ridge is, yeah, starts at 15 and goes up to pretty late. What are these quests? It goes up to 20. I don't know why this is 23, but it's pretty much just it goes up to 20. So 15 to 20, Red Ridge is almost a no-brainer. You might leave there a little bit earlier just because in between all of the low-level questing, you're also going to want to do dungeons. So if you manage to do enough dungeons in between Red Ridge quests that it gets you to level 20, then you'll skip the end of Red Ridge, which, as we know, is a little bit less efficient, and you will just head over to Duskwood, which is also really close by. So humans have that advantage. Gnomes and dwarves only need to take the deep run tram, which is also why if Loch Modan ends up being better, humans are still not at a major disadvantage. And night elves, meanwhile, are kind of fucked. They have to go a really long distance, and assuming that we're not using any like warlock summon stuff, which, you know, you could do, but generally speaking, my speedruns, I opt to not use warlocks because I feel it's kind of cheating. Because then that just defeats the purpose of having class utility like mage portals, etc. Obviously, that would get around it, but if you're not using that, then the boat ride would take quite a lot of time. So it's hard to say if druids would actually be really that efficient for Alliance. I don't know. They might end up being so ridiculously good that in the long run, it just makes up for it. I think for AoE during Berserk, I just press Mangle and this other stuff, because Mangle hitting 3 targets obviously makes it really good. Yeah, definitely Pulverize without stacks of Lacerate is not good. Wow, that only gave me... That was really terrible. Alright, here. Let me, after this pull, I'm going to check my damage breakdown, actually. Curious to see. Cattle of non-guaranteed drops. Yeah, unfortunately. Definitely is an annoying part of this era of WoW. Even in Cataclysm. Still an unfortunate thing. And there we go. Fucking hell. Okay, so if I look at my damage on the previous pull, yeah, Moonfire did very, very little. It only did 2% of my overall. So the Moonfire damage scaling is definitely really not good in this version of WoW. I remember in Classic Era, it was doing a considerable amount of my damage, but also Druid tanking in Classic Era, like, you do not have great AoE damage. So yeah, it definitely means that I made the correct choice not going with the Moonfire glyph. But, I mean, it might still be a decent pulling option. I really don't know how efficient Feral Fairy Fire is going to be for pulling, especially because it has a 6-second cooldown. Moonfire is instant, so I think the utility of it is still quite nice. Oh my god. I do not remember this quest being as bad as it feels right now. I feel like I'm actually just getting really unlucky with drops. I want to say that in all of my previous testing runs, I had way better luck getting this to drop. Jesus fucking Christ. Oh my god, yeah, because I do not recall ever having to pull so many Worgen. I'm gonna go over here and I'm just gonna pull that. Just because. That is rough. That is really fucking rough, man. Christ. Alright. At least it's done. You'd rather have 20 drops than 5 drops with a 25% chance? Yeah. I mean, for the most part, yeah. Obviously, that was just really, really, really bad. Undead have a fast starting zone? Yes. That being said, it's a little bit tricky. I would say Undead have maybe one of the better starting zones at this stage. None of the early starting zones are amazing, and the reason for that is because when you have such terrible mobility, there really aren't any that are like that good. The only, in my opinion, truly good starting zone in this era of WoW is... yeah, I don't really want that. The only truly good starting zone is the human starting zone. It is the only one that is just objectively fast. Especially because it segues right into Elwynn Forest, which is, by far, the best 5 to 10 zone. So Elwynn Forest is maybe the only questing hub that's actually worth doing. And even then, one of the other things about Elwynn Forest is it has one of the best mob grind spots in the Murlocs on that lake. So, like, Elwynn Forest and the human starting zone is just insane, which is why I genuinely think that for speed leveling, you almost need to play a human. And earlier I mentioned that I think Paladin has the potential to be one of the fastest. So I think you actually just straight up play Paladin for human. And that's the best alliance speed leveling race class combo. Not 100% sure on that. I would, of course, need to test it to be certain. But that is at least my current speculation. For Horde, it's a little more challenging because they don't have any, like, amazing options. Right now, I want to say, like, I'm leaning towards, I think Tauren is just going to be the best, because Tauren can be both Paladins and Druids. And the Tauren starting zone is not terrible, but more importantly, there's, like, a few pretty good mob grinding spots in the Tauren starting area. So it's not, like, awful. The only downside to Tauren is we all know that the absolute best spot to level whatchamacallit, from pretty much 10 all the way up to 25 is Silverpine and Hillsbred. Silverpine and Hillsbred are absolutely crazy. They are so much better than pretty much every other option for Horde around that level. Ashara is, like, okay, but Silverpine is king. It is such an amazing zone, even in this version of WoW. And Tauren have the hardest path to get to Silverpine and Hillsbrad by far. So it's almost like the Night Elf situation for Alliance again, where the best questing hubs are so far away from you that you just have to wonder, is this actually really worth doing? And I don't know. That's going to be my challenge in terms of routing all of this stuff. Now, I will say for casual leveling, right, it's a no-brainer. You do Silverpine Hillsbrad regardless of what you pick, and if you're just leveling casually, you don't give a shit if it takes you time to get there. You hop in a flight path, you go make some coffee, and you're just done, right? But eating an immediate 2-minute time loss does kind of feel bad from a speedrunning context, so we'll have to see. I'm not entirely sure how that's going to impact things. Pulverize is really nice once I've gotten my stacks built up, but sometimes like that just did like no damage. And I had 2 stacks of Lacerate. Twilight Servitors. I think I just talked to them, right? Yeah. Just through the draft. Just going to the back here. I don't really care if they attack me. They're not going to do any significant damage. Yeah, I can kill these mobs now. I think I'm hitting both of them. Oh yeah, I'm cleaving. They're within range. Alright, so the range on Mangle's cleave is relatively forgiving in Classic. I was worried it was going to be one of those things where they had to be, like, pixel stacked. A lot of old Classic AoE is like that, where it's like, if they aren't literally pixel stacked, it doesn't hit multiple targets. And that can be kind of frustrating, but that is a relatively forgiving range. But I will say, on this topic, well, I don't exactly know what's going to be fast, because like Meatwad said in Twitch chat, I do think that Undead maybe have the best starting zone. The only issue with Undead is they have none of the traditionally good race class combos. So it's really hard to say. Honestly, Warrior is not bad, because I've been leveling up my Warrior, and it feels pretty good. But it's not Druid, and it's not... what was it again? I think it's Fire, then Earth, then Air. Yeah, I got it memorized now. Alright. I don't know why sometimes my attack macros are not working correctly. And then now, when I use Pulverize now, it just didn't do that much damage. I don't know. I think it's just because it's not critting, but it feels like when Pulverize crits, it's awesome. And when it doesn't, it just does very little damage. Whereas, so far, it seems like Lacerate, Mangle, and Maul are just much more consistent damage dealers. I don't know. Like, yeah, they barely hit for anything. And then because it consumes my bleeds, like, the instant damage on Lacerate is almost just as good. Yeah, I don't know. I genuinely do not think, at this point, unless I am really missing something, it genuinely seems like it is literally better to just spam Lacerate on a single target. It just hits harder. And then you're not losing the damage from the bleed, having to ramp it back up again. Oh, fuck, I forgot to... I forgot to loot the box. Right, it doesn't drop off him, it drops off this. There we go. Not a big deal. But yeah, anyways, I will say, regardless what ends up being fast, one of the things that makes me really excited for, like, leveling in Cataclysm Classic is just this entire challenge. Like, this may sound frustrating, right, of having to figure out, like, how do I string together these zones and stuff, but I love that. I love the fact that it's not straightforward. Honestly, one of the reasons why I'm, like, a little bit bored of retail speed leveling is because it's just kind of been the same thing for years now. Based on the changes that Blizzard has made in the War Within Alpha to, like, experience scaling, it looks like it's going to be exactly the same route that we use for 10 to 60, and now it's going to be applied from 10 to 70. And don't get me wrong, that's not bad. Frankly, it makes my life a lot easier, because now I don't need to make, like, a brand new leveling route just for, you know, the War Within, for getting caught up to endgame. It makes it a lot easier, especially for people who aren't super into leveling, because they don't need to watch, like, a completely different guide. I'll still be making an updated guide, especially because just in the time since Dragonflight's launch, there have been a lot of little optimizations that we've made to the route that aren't included in my guide from 2 years ago. And then if I make a new guide, then I can include all that stuff, so I think it'll be helpful. But the general routing is going to be pretty much the same. And that's, like I said, it's both good and bad. It's, I think, good on Blizzard's part, but from, like, a speed leveling perspective for me, I'm just like, oh, this is boring. I've done this a million times. But that's kind of why Cataclysm is so nice, because then we don't need to worry about, like, oh no, we don't have a new speed leveling route. Well, we just, also, I'm getting kind of fucked here. Also, Skull Bash actually has such a really nice sound effect to it in this. I don't remember that being the case, but that is like a juicy sound effect. That should be good. Yeah, but the nice thing about Classic and stuff is all of the fun speed routing or speed leveling, like, route optimization stuff I can now do on Classic. So it still gives me that fun, like, optimization puzzle, which I've said before is the main reason I enjoy doing speed leveling in the first place. A lot of people ask, like, why do I enjoy speed running and stuff? And it's not that I enjoy just leveling characters for the sake of leveling characters. It's just really, really, really fun to solve that puzzle. To look at, like, a bunch of disconnected zones and think to myself, like, what is the fastest way to get from point A to point B? That is just a really enjoyable experience. Also, what the fuck is that tornado? I might be fucked here, because that tornado thing just absolutely shredded my health while they were already casting on me. Though, yeah, my little absorb shields that I get by doing damage barely kept me alive. That was fucking brutal. Just gonna heal myself again. I also, for big pulls like that, I need to start remembering to do, like, thorns and whatnot before I enter. I should get into the habit of doing that. I only need one more Howling Rift Dweller. And also, this is pure single target, so let's test out Cat for this. Obviously, AoE Cat isn't nearly as good, but in this situation, I think that was much faster than I could have killed it on Bear. So that's pretty good. Let's take this. Then we go into the cave. Also, I've had my food sitting right by me. I wanted to at least, you know, finish what I was talking about, but I kind of, like, finished the point that I was making. So I'm going to mute my mic for a little bit while I eat. And then I will unmute it when I'm done eating. So I will continue playing, though. It's not really hard to do that. Enjoy your food. Thank you. Let me really quickly do this, just because I don't want to fuck this up. I can at least spend all my energy before shifting into this. So maybe it would help to, like, start as cat and then shift into bear, that felt like pretty good. I know, I'll have to play around with it a bit more. Anyways, I'll mute my mic. Okay, I had to unmute for that. Dare I say it, I think I figured out bear. That felt insane. That was, like, my health barely moved. Okay, I get it now. It's like suddenly everything is just clicked. And I genuinely believe that Pulverize is just a dog shit button. But, like, all the other buttons have a use case, and they all actually flow together really well, and I understand, like, the priority when I press this. This feels good. I really like this, actually. It's, I don't know, I'm really excited for Blood DK. I'm still pretty sure out of all the tanks that I played, I really want to play Blood, but it's like classes in Cataclysm, especially tanks, because that's mainly what I've been testing, they just feel really fucking good. Like, I enjoy retail bear. It's not like Blood DK where I hate retail Blood DK and I love Cataclysm Classic Blood DK, but that felt really good. Now that I get it, like, I understand what I'm supposed to be doing. Oh, that was awesome. You can just do gigantic pulls and your health bar doesn't fucking move. It's just great. I think even on, like, 2 targets, it's probably still better to use Swipe. Maybe actually on 2 targets it might be better to use Lacerate. It does. No. Swipe. Is Swipe uncapped? Yeah, it is uncapped. Oh, fuck. Okay, now on 2 to 3 targets, I think I probably still tab Lacerate. But I think it's just better still, if I have the ability to do so, to do those gigantic AoE pulls and then just swipe it down. And then I get Thrash. And how is that going to work? Oh, fuck, that mob just respawned. I think I just weave that into, like, in between swipes. Because it doesn't... Oh my god. These mobs just going to keep respawning directly on top of me. It's not going to be like an AoE lacerate. It doesn't quite replace it like that, but I think that weaving it in on large pulls instead of swipe, it hits harder. It hits like about as hard as swipe, but then also applies a bleed. The one thing I'm not sure about is if Thrash Bleed stacks in this version. I don't know if it does. If it doesn't, then honestly it might not be that good. You would still probably want to use it in place of swipe whenever possible. One thing that is nice about Druid, though, and another thing that might make them insanely good for leveling is in Cataclysm, well, in Classic in general, I'm sure most people know this, you need to train your spells. And training your spells can be a bit of a nuisance because you have to go all the way back to your trainer to learn your stuff. And we don't really have things like the dollar on Hearthstone yet that make it easy to get back to main cities at this stage of the game. So how do you efficiently train your spells? And the answer for a lot of classes, I think, is going to be you don't. Unless you absolutely need a spell, you're just not going to go back and train it. You're only going to go back like once every 10 levels or something, train all the really important stuff, and not care about it. And honestly, that's one of the reasons why I think Paladin looks kind of nice, because Divine Storm is a talent option that you get. I need to... One thing I should do is I need to take Prowl and at least put the base spell on my cat form bar. That way, when I'm already in cat form, yeah, that way I can just do it without having to, like, unshift myself. Also, yeah, I think this is going to be another day when we never find a dungeon, unfortunately. Then we got the final guy over there. Anyways, yeah, I'm gonna go back to eating. I got really excited by that big AoE pull, and I wanted to talk about it, but let's, use Dark Flight here. Should be able to dodge these mobs. And we drop down here. Hop into the lava. Aquatic form. And I'm going to try cat form for this. At the very least, I'm going to build up a gigantic rip, and then until I run out of energy, I'm going to stay in here. Because I think it's going to be faster. Alright. And then reapply that, and then I'm going to shift into bear form to finish him off. Yeah, that felt good. I'm happy with that. Still gonna get attacked here, but I think I can run out. And we should be good. Nice. Where's the next set of quests? Over there. Alright, now I will remute my mic for real this time.
Hello. Safe travels. See you later. How are you?
May the eternal sun shine.
I am honored. What brings you here?
Ah, I've been expecting you.
What brings you here?
How may I help? Be careful.
wish to speak? What?
Peace be with you.
What brings you here? May the stars guide you. Is there trouble?
Okay, at this point, my food is mostly done. So I think it's fine to unmute my mic. I'm not even sure what other talents I want to take here. Most of the talents outside of the bear tree are actually pretty terrible, so I think I'm gonna just go with this and then eventually take feral aggression, because like I genuinely don't know what else I would even want. This is just kind of fine. Also, I could be wrong, but I feel like this is a much faster pace than my previous runs. Obviously, I'm more familiar with the quests and stuff, so that helps, but only 1 hour does not seem bad at all. It definitely, you know, it slows down a lot. The later levels start to take like 2-3 hours, etc. So it's not as if this is like a 6-hour pace or something, or 5-hour pace or whatever. But wait, it seriously one-shot the injured fawn? Oh my god. Okay. Well, in that case, I need to be careful about where I move. They keep up with my flying speed, so as long as I don't kite them directly on top of any of the enemy mobs, I think we're fine. And I believe I kite them over to my loon over here. Yeah, that's it. And that quest in, and then it'll send me to the chuck the bears out of the tree quest, which is always fun. Do I want this? Agility crit, haste expertise. Yeah, probably. I meant to say mastery crit, but yeah. Same thing. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that necessarily Druid is faster in terms of at this level killing things than Blood DK. Everything starts to feel relatively comparable at higher levels. Druid utility is definitely really nice, being able to just scoop up the stuff without having to worry about it. And I think a lot of my speed at this point comes down to just familiarity with the actual quests, rather than, you know, oh my god, Druid is absolutely insane, especially considering, you know, I'm not even playing Druid amazingly well, and I don't have nearly the same level of gear as, say, my Prop Paladin. I think, so far, out of all of the specs that I've leveled, Prop Paladin genuinely feels the worst, which is a shame, because I like Prop Paladin, but I did not expect Prop Paladin's AoE to feel so bad after the changes. It's, like, it's fine, but Blood DK obviously just shreds everything in AoE, and so far, you know, Feral Druid has just been doing ridiculous AoE as well, especially on really high target pulls. And Paladin just, it feels like everything is way too target capped. Like, one of the things that makes Swipe feel so strong is I do these, like, 6+ mob pulls, and it's hitting all of them and doing ludicrous damage. And you just don't get that with any of Prop Paladin stuff. It's just they have, what, Avenger's Shield, Hammer of the Righteous, and that's kind of it. Consecration does okay damage to a single target, but they just can't really do gigantic AoE pulls, like, alone. Which is kind of ironic, considering they are... In Wrath, they were the best AoE tank. In Vanilla, they're considered to be one of the best AoE tanks. I'm pretty sure TVC as well. And even in retail now, they are, well, right now at max level, there's obviously weird stuff like, you know, Fearlath just does insane damage, but excluding max level endgame shenanigans, in terms of leveling, you know, when it's just their kit and no endgame gear, Prop Paladins, once again, have some of the best high target AoE. And I think the main issue now is because the target count of Avenger Shield feels so limited, same with Hammer of the Righteous, it being, you know, fairly limited in terms of how much damage it can actually do, and your, what's it called? Your Shield of the Righteous only hits a single target. That's, I think, the big offender. Just feels like Prop Paladin is so weak relative to everything else. And Blood DK, admittedly, like, is really good on low target cleave because Heartstrike will just shred stuff, and that's most of leveling, especially in these zones, so it's not really a concern. Well, at lower levels, I was struggling a little bit with high target AoE. Once you get, what's it called? Outbreak, and then you Pestilence and spam Blood Boil, suddenly you're really good at high target AoE too, so it just doesn't matter. What do I need? It's just these mobs. And I guess Bear is kind of even more incentivized to do bigger and bigger pulls, because I don't really have a rotational rage generator. It seems like most of my rage is just based on damage taken, which I know is kind of how things worked back in the day. But that just means that the higher the target counts, the more Bear's AoE just goes through the roof. And that, yeah, I don't know, I feel like that's just going to be a limitation of Paladin. That being said, I don't think Paladin as a class is bad, because I think realistically, if you're trying to level as a Paladin, you should just be doing Retribution. Ret is just objectively a better leveling spec than Prot at this stage. I'm not really going to test it as much going into Cataclysm, just because I'm not really planning on playing my Prot Paladin on launch anyways. Frankly, if anything, this run has made me more convinced that Bear is probably the class that I want to level second, because I'm quite enjoying this. But I still think I'm going to start with Blood DK. But I don't know. I can't see Prop Paladin actually being really that good. And given the way that, like, you know, speedrunning dungeons work, I actually think Guardian Druid or Feral Druid might be just the best dungeon tank. Just because if you can do these massive pulls and your damage just goes ridiculously high. Also, come to think of it, I haven't killed enough Lava Surgers just yet. I'm going to tag all these Core Hounds. And I should be fine. Ah, that one's leashing. Fuck. I think I pulled it a little bit too far. But if I tag it with Fairy Fire, it should still be fine. I can cleave all three of them down at once. They're, like, all very close to leashing, so I have to be really careful, especially because I'm getting knocked around. But I think if I do this correctly, this is really efficient, because I need 3 Core Hound entrails, and there's 3 of them here. What is happening to my mouse? Okay. Alright, 1 more Core Hound entrail, 1 more Lava Surger. Just gonna pop down here and take care of that. I don't know. I still think Blood DK is probably the best dungeon tank, just because, especially for more difficult stuff, they are very self-reliant. I don't know exactly how self-sustaining Bear is going to be. Definitely seems like the Primal Fury shielding is much stronger than I realized, which is good, But I don't know if that's enough to single-handedly push it above Blood DK for dungeon tanking. But it is worth a shot. Did I really not get Corehound entrails? Jesus fuck. Okay, I was getting pretty lucky there for a little while, and now the game has just said fuck you and stopped giving me any good drops. So that's lovely. This is Druid Stonks. Corehound over there. I'd like to get... Okay, here we go. Good double Corehound pull. This is nice. Oh, okay. I almost pulled Nemesis, but we're fine. That. And last one. While I'm here, I'm gonna hop into the portal and do... I can do it, right? No. Shit. I guess there's a breadcrumb that I have to pick up before I can do that. I want to make sure I do it early because I believe last time I tried to do the jousting quests, it was phased and I couldn't actually start it. But I know for a fact that if I do it before transforming the zone, then it works.
Always temper your strength with wisdom.
No, that's not an upgrade.
We serve the land.
Nemesis shell fragments. And the Flame Ward thing. Ideally, if I could do the Flame Ward thing while Nemesis is nearby, that would be nice. Although, you know what? Best way to do the Nemesis thing? I think I got it, actually. I didn't think about this before. This should work. Is it within range? No, it's not. Fuck me, are you serious? Oh. Fuck, it is. It's not interrupting it. There we go. Got it. And now Nemesis is going to chase after me shortly after, but if I hop in here, I drop combat. Ha 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 ha. That worked out well. Never thought to do that before, but that's definitely the strat. Because I spent like at least 15-30 seconds the last time I did this just running away from him, and that's time lost. It's a little bit janky that it took like a few seconds for him to actually activate. Where are the mobs? Maybe this one isn't working? I mean, presumably, if no mobs are spawning for this Flame Ward, I'm pretty sure I just get credit the moment this buff falls off. So maybe this one's just bugged and it doesn't spawn mobs? In which case, that's a pretty nice little time save. Yeah, there you go. Not even the full duration. Alright, easy fucking peasy. Oh, shit. Okay, finally an upgrade to my weapon. And now it's the Tortola quest. This is the nice underwater one. Go break these things. And Just missing one egg. Nice. Yeah, that is so much faster as a druid than, like, anything else. Holy hell. I still think Moonfire, even if it doesn't do a lot of damage, like, I don't have anything on Paladin or Blood DK that can round up mobs that fast. Like, Death Grip's nice, but you don't have infinite uses of it. That just, you tag a bunch of mobs, no cooldown, long range. Really fucking nice. Where's the next quest? Is this... It might be that I need to do Sethria's Roost first before it gives me the next quest. I think normally by this point I had already done Sethria's Roost, so that makes sense. I was wondering if this was skippable, because you get it at kind of a weird time, but it seems like no, this is required. Okay. Fuck me. Okay, what do I need to do? I need to kill 12 minions and pick up Twilight Armor Plates. I also need to pick up this quest, which is just a quick turn-in. What I'm curious about is it faster to turn this in? I don't remember which breadcrumb this is for. Codex in the Shadows. Ah, this might actually, yeah. I think it might be worth it doing that. Because this way, while I run around and do everything else... That's not Aviana's egg. Sethria's hatchling doesn't count for killing minions, though. But what I could do here... Run around, grab armor plates, and then if I find Aviana's egg, in order to kill... Oh, there it is. Kill 2 birds, 1 stone. I just run around, and I tag a bunch of mobs. Oh, fuck. Okay, yeah, and the mobs that get summoned to attack the egg are actually ones that count. Okay, that's definitely worth doing. Yep. Perfect. Can I loot armor plates off it? Yeah. Alright, that is definitely worth. Now I need to kill a few more minions and loot a few more armor plates. And that's actually nice because then it summons attackable minions to me instead of me having to, like, hunt it down and fight over tags. So that's a little tiny optimization. 1 more armor plate. I'm going to jump out of flight form here. And I'm going to tag... I need 5. That's 5. Oh, right, I forgot. Yeah, this is the... These are the mobs that do, like, exponentially higher damage the more of them I'm fighting at once. So this might actually fuck me. This... I can't remember if... I think this killed my prop paladin. But... the fact that I lived this... I'm actually 99% sure I died last run on my prop paladin, and I just live it on bear. Bear survivability is, like, actually... way better than I expected it would be. Because you have a lot of little cooldowns. It is just like retail where you have bark skin. Frenzied regen is significantly less powerful than in retail. Because that is, without a doubt, one of the strongest parts of druid leveling. Just frenzied regen being able to effectively full heal you on like a 30-second cooldown. It's nuts. But... okay. Yeah, that feels really good. Quest is a little bit annoying, peeling off all the armor, but I feel like that was faster than if I had tried to just, like, cleave them down while peeling their armor. Hello, Codeine. How goes the speed? Pretty good, honestly. This feels really nice. It's like a combination of Bear being significantly faster than I expected it to be, but also just... I feel like I've gotten the route optimized a lot. Also, something that I should have done here is we have to go all the way down there for Sethria, and Sethria is pretty far away. So I should have done this earlier, but I'm just going to do it now because it's still going to be a time save. Is there an innkeeper here? There might not be, in which case, unlucky. I think maybe there is after you restore it. Yeah, there's no... There's no innkeeper here. I believe, according to my map, there's an innkeeper here. I don't know if there's an innkeeper over there, but there's definitely one at Shrine of Aviana. So, yeah, but I should, you know what I should do? Is I should do the Sethria's Roost quests before the Shrine of Aviana quests. Like, head over here, then just, like, set my Hearthstone, and then before I finish that up, maybe? I don't know. I'll need to play around with that a little bit more. Either way, it's not super important. There we go. I was hiding under the stairs. The reason I'm doing this, and the reason why I'm going out of my way to do it still, even though there was no Hearthstone nearby, is I still need to learn Thrash. I haven't gone and learned new stuff. But that makes me hearth all the way to, or teleport to Moonglade. So I'm going to go down to Sethria. After I kill Sethria, I'm going to teleport to Moonglade. I'm going to learn Thrash, and then I'm going to hearth back here. And that'll save me a little bit of travel time. Would you say spamming random dungeon finder for 80 to 85 is viable? That is something I still need to test. I'm looking around to see if I can get people to help me test that on the beta. Because I don't know the exact experience values. And it's also hard to say because, like, you're obviously in a group of 5 people and, you know, there's random queue times. So the no-brainer answer to that is, if you're going to do dungeons, do them in between queues. Or do quests in between queues, I mean. That should come as no surprise to anybody. However, I do need to test to see exactly how efficient it is relative to everything else. And that much I don't know. What I can say is that Random Dungeon Finder is significantly more efficient at low levels, and it will be, at least for launch, purely because of how, like, how crowded, that's the word I'm looking for, duh. How crowded the zones are going to be on launch. It's going to be, I barely missed the last refresh. I also forgot to use signal rockets. It's going to be really swarmed with players on day one, to nobody's surprise, right? And as a result, if you're doing stuff in Random Dungeon Finder, you're not going to be having to compete with other players for tags, and it's just going to make the experience a hell of a lot easier. So I think that is the main set of levels, basically 80 to 82, where it is worth doing. Because if you can get ahead of everybody else, and you can reach a point where you're not competing with anybody for tags, and you're just questing alone in, like, Uldum or Deepholm or something like that, then that's pretty chill. And a lot of people are recommending, oh, you should do all of Deepholm because Deepholm is required at endgame to, Deepholm's required at endgame to get the Therazane enchants. And, like, that's true, but the same could be said about, like, literally all of the quests. Aside from a few quest lines that give no rep. Oh, shit. I forgot what I was doing. No, this is where I go to Moonglade. Aside from the quest lines that give no rep, most of them give something. Like, if I scroll up, you can see I got Guardians of Hyjal rep, and a lot of these factions, if you get them to Exalted, which really isn't that hard, because you have a lot of reputation from the quests themselves, and then you get the tabards that let you spam dungeons and stuff, then you're able to level up, or rep up really efficiently. And, you know, some people will say, you should do that while leveling to kill two birds, one stone. It's debatable, because you're also getting some stuff by doing dungeons as well, or skipping Oldham, or skipping Deep Home, right? I think only spamming dungeons and doing nothing else all the way up to 85 is a bad idea, but if you, like, skip some of the quests while leveling to do dungeons, and then come back later, you're gonna have to come back later anyway, and it's gonna be easier if you're doing it at level 85. So, I think that there's pros and cons to it. Personally, I'm probably not going to do all of Deep Home while leveling, just because I find it to be very tedious. It's not really any race, you just need to have it done before raid, which is not hard. So I'm just going to get to 85 as fast as I reasonably can, and then I'll do all the quests for reputation later on. That's my plan, at least. As for how much dungeons will play a role in that, hard to really say. But doing every single dungeon at least once for the quests is a good idea. After that, debatable. Spamming random dungeon finder for the first 7 for the weekly bonus is probably the fastest 5 levels you got so far. Well, maybe. I'll have to see. That's another thing that I'm not sure about. If, like, because I think the weekly bonus, is the weekly bonus for experience too? I'm pretty sure you just get a bonus to justice points in this stuff, and the experience that you get is just for doing the random dungeon finder, period. Also, this, I should have waited for Shrine of Aviana there. It's for XP and gold. Interesting. Yeah, that's good to know. I'm curious what the experience bonus would look like after you've exhausted it. You got like 3k more XP when you had the bonus? Yeah. I'm not sure what it would be then for Cataclysm leveling. Well, in that case, dungeons definitely lose a lot of their value, especially because you would only want to do them mostly for the quests anyway. And that means, well, I don't know exactly how many dungeons you would get. That would actually mean you really want to ration out your dungeon completions. Let me think about this. So another thing to consider for, that's the Hearthstone quote. Something to consider is that the item level jump between even the level 80 normal dungeons and the endgame Wrath of the Lich King gear is actually pretty massive. I don't know if it was like that before. I don't think... I can check. Do I have Atlas Loot installed? I don't have Atlas Loot. Yeah, if somebody happens to know what the item level gap was between, let's say, Utgard Keep and... I don't know, Sunwell. I am fairly certain that Utgard Keep gear was worse. I could be wrong in that, but, like, what does Utgard Keep drop? Honestly, I'm gonna wowhead this just because I'm curious. So, Utgard Keep zone, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm pretty sure I can check drops, right? Yeah, so let's look at, I don't know, take an example. So it's item level on normal, item level 155. So we have Arm Blade of the Oglemere, 155 fist weapon. And then we look at Sunwell Plateau, and yeah, it's about equal. Sunwell Plateau, most of the gear is... the best gear is 164, which is higher than Utgard Keep. And then the absolute worst gear that I can find here is... from Sunwell Plateau, there's a handful of 141 items, but that's just rings. I know those look like PvP things. The lowest gear is 154, which is basically like equivalent to Utgard Keep. So effectively, Utgard Keep gives equivalent gear to Sunwell Plateau. But that being said, Sunwell Plateau gear is most likely itemized to be way better. And there's like really good trinkets, etc., that are way better than dungeon trinkets. I don't even think there are really good dungeon trinkets in Utgard Keep. So while you're still spamming it for experience, you're not really going to replace your gear until much later. But to compare, endgame Wrath of the Lich King gear right now, 25 heroic is 277. And obviously there's stuff like Shadowmourne, which is much higher. If you have Shadowmourne, you're not going to replace it for a little while. I do not have Shadowmourne on my Death Knight. And if you have like Hallion trinkets, they're I think what, 284 or something like that. And just to give you an idea of the item level gap between the very first dungeon that you get at level 80, this is already 308 item level. That is a massive jump. And technically, this only requires level 78. You don't even need to be 80. But you're going to be, of course, for day 1 leveling. But that is just how good the stuff is. You can't see the full loot table. For whatever reason, the loot table has been really buggy on PTR, on the Dungeon Journal. But, for instance, unless you have, like, literally Shadowmourne on your Death Knight, the absolute best weapon that you'll be able to get at level 80 is Whitefin Axe from Throne of the Tides. It's really, really good. It's, like, absolutely massive in terms of an upgrade compared to anything else that you can get from Wrath. Honestly, it's probably pretty close to Shadowmourne, though Shadowmourne, of course, has much better itemization. It has the proc effect, which does damage and gives you, like, a big boost of strength. So I'm pretty sure Shadowmoon is still better. Don't get me wrong. But that is a really massive upgrade early on. And also, as far as trinkets go, I can't speak for every single class, but at least for me as a Death Knight, Might of the Ocean is a ludicrously good trinket. It's just like as good as a lot of level 80 trinkets, except it's much higher level in terms of, I mean, the design of it is on par with like a good raid trinket, and it's just ridiculously high item level. So I don't know what trinkets I'm going to use on my Death Knight going in. I'm probably going to use Death's Choice and Darkmoon Card Greatness, because I don't have, like, Hallion Trinket. I don't have a lot of the really, really good ICC ones. But Death's Choice is just really, really, really good. You can get that very easily. And Darkmoon Card Greatness is also very, very good, and you can get it easily. But I'm probably going to replace Darkmoon Card Greatness with Might of the Ocean when I get it, because hopefully, unless I get really unlucky... do I just kill 10 of these guys again? Yeah. Unless I get really unlucky with drops, I should be able to get Might of the Ocean from, like, the first few Throne of the Tides runs. And that's one of the good reasons to do that. That'll be a massive upgrade compared to whatever I'm using. And the thing about that is, you don't really replace it until level 85. You only start getting, like, 315 items from level 83, 84 quests. And if I recall, on my Blood DK, I did not get a weapon upgrade until, like, midway through Twilight Highlands. It might have just been that whatever quest gave the strength weapon upgrade, I happened to skip accidentally, and I didn't realize. But I was using a really low item level weapon, like 277 or something, for a long time. And meanwhile, if I had done Throne of the Tides and got in Whitefin Axe, that would have been a massive damage increase starting from level 80. Which is a lot. Or level 81 if you're, like, pre-questing, which I will probably do. Just because if you're already trying to skip the first 2 zones, then pre-questing becomes worth doing. I didn't realize that was going to bounce me so far. This I can just eat the fall damage. Oh, there is no fall damage. Okay. Nice. I think this is all 40, and then I just go back up. Ow. I kind of like these jousting quests. They're pretty chill. As for whether or not it's worth it, It's hard to say. I'm getting, what, 30,000, 27,000 experience now from these quests. Not one of Aviana's Guardians. I thought I was clicking on it. Okay. The egg one is definitely the slowest. Killing the Twilight Lancers are... It's not very hard. Especially when they group up. Like this. Okay. Yeah, 30,000. That's not bad, I think. I don't know if I would do this on launch day, but I think if you're casually leveling, that's, like, fine. The only downside of that is you fall further behind the campaign, and it is skippable, so... maybe not worth. That said, I think most people aren't going to be doing this on launch day anyways. You'll see. Your dumbass thought those dungeon quests would be repeatable? Yeah. Yeah, it's an understandable thing to be confused about. But yeah, that's one of the things. It still works like that in retail for reference. You can only do them once, so... It's one of the reasons why, in my retail leveling route, I always recommend that you only do TBC dungeons up to, like, level 30, and then you stop doing them. Because by that point, you've pretty much exhausted all the really good dungeons and their associated dungeon quests, and there's just no real incentive to continue beyond that point. But it's still good the first time you do it. Every single dungeon tends to be really good, and the quests, if done properly, can turn a normally really bad dungeon into something worth running. That said, I still wonder if... oh shit. Almost got in combat. That would have been bad. It wouldn't really have been bad, it just would have been a slight misoptimization. What is up with M plus in retail? You're 497 and you won't get invited to a +2. Well, 497 is enough for a +2, but what you're confused about is Mythic Plus in retail got changed this season. So nowadays, what used to be a Mythic Plus 10 is actually Mythic 0. If you watch my alt catch-up guide, I had a section in that video that discussed this. But obviously, I don't expect that everybody did. But yeah, it's very confusing, and I've been doing a few, like, low-level keys just to get my weekly quest done. To do, like, the 4 mythic dungeons. And I've noticed a lot of people doing these dungeons and being confused as to why they are struggling so much. Thinking, like, wow, it's only a +2. I used to do these all the time. Why is this so hard? Well, what you don't realize is that right now, a mythic +2 is basically a mythic 11 key, I guess. It's pretty much equivalent to what an 11 key was in the previous season. And for a lot of people, I'm not saying that's the case for you, but there's a lot of people who only did low mythic plus keys, and now effectively mythic plus just isn't for them. And I think it's one of those systems that, in the long run, I think this is an improvement. Because the idea is meant to be that instead of new players skipping all previous dungeon content, like, normal dungeons are still meant for leveling, but now heroic dungeons are meant to be an alternative for early game gearing. Basically, heroic dungeons now give gear equivalent to what Mythic 0 dungeons give, or gave before, and they're meant to be like a comparable difficulty. And you can still kind of give, you can still kind of skip heroic dungeons. They aren't amazing for gearing, but basically they give gear equivalent to most world events. Whereas before, heroic dungeons were completely worthless because the gear they gave was just worse than what you got from world quests and world events like Tuskar Soup, Emerald Dream, etc. So, like, why would you ever do them? Now, at least, if you don't feel like doing all the world content stuff, it is an okay option for grinding, though I still recommend skipping it just because you can run into M0s and get even better gear, and M0s are really not that hard these days. While they are technically speaking equivalent to what a plus 10 was last season, there is no timer. Because there is no timer, it is significantly easier than it would normally be. I'm gonna do this last set of quests. Also, on one hand, I don't think I've been using Thrash, but at the same time, I don't think I've really been in combat since I picked up Thrash. But anyways, yeah. So basically, at 497, you know, obviously you are good enough to run keys, but the thing that you need to consider is it's not necessarily that people don't want you. It's that especially this week, I am 518 item level, and I am queuing for +2s because I want to get my Mythic Weekly quest done. And I guarantee you that there's a lot of other people doing exactly the same thing because, you know, either they're going to do M0s, which I did a bunch of those, but there were a handful of +2s that I did just because it was more convenient. Like, I think on my Brewmaster Monk, I did a single run of M0 Ruby Life Pools, and my Brewmaster Monk is the 518 character that I'm talking about. I did one M0 Ruby Life Pools, and then I just spammed a bunch of +2 Ruby Life Pools just to get my key out of the way. Because at this point, I don't need any gear from Mythic Plus. It's, like, the only items that I still need are from Raid, and I have a full Mythic Raid vault, so, like, I don't care about filling up my my Mythic Plus vault, but I still needed to get my 2 bullion from the weekly quest. So I just wanted to do whatever the fastest dungeon possible was to get that done, and that is still a +2 or a +0. So the problem is you're going to have a lot of people like me who are queuing for dungeons right now, +2s, and if you look at it from a group leader's perspective, they don't know you. They're not gonna, you know, go and check your logs or whatever and see, like, is this guy, like, does he have potential? They're gonna look at, you know, multiple people in their sign-up window. They're gonna see this one person that's signing up is 518 item level, and this other guy's 497. And like I said, 497, not bad at all. For reference, my Guardian Druid is around 497. I think it might actually be almost exactly that. I'm either 495, 497, and I've been doing multiple keys around that level, +2, +3, +4, and I'm more than capable of tanking it. Of course, it's much easier to get into groups as a tank than as, like, a DPS. Healers also have an easier time getting into groups. But if you are a DPS, then there are going to be people like me who are just trying to get their weekly quest done, and as a result, you're just going to have a hard time getting into groups. So it's just kind of the difficulty with pugging M+ in general. I'll give you the same advice that I give anybody with getting into keys. If you really want to do it, the absolute best way is to find a guild. I know that is not necessarily amazing advice for everybody. You know, different people have different situations that make it harder for them to find a guild, but it should go without saying that that is just the most reliable way to really push keys, if you want to do that. The unfortunate thing about finding a guild is that there really aren't that many Mythic Plus guilds, per se. Like, you're not going to find a guild that's like, we exist solely to push score, especially because it is a, you know, low player activity that you only need a handful of people for. So generally speaking, like, there are people in my guild, for instance, that push Mythic Plus, but my guild is a raiding guild. We raid, and then outside of raid, there are some people who like to push Mythic Plus, and they have their own group of 5. So if you are not interested in raiding and you're only interested in doing keys, maybe it isn't necessarily the best advice, which is kind of one of the main difficulties with Mythic Plus in general. I don't really have a surefire solution for that, but what I will say is if all you're interested in doing is just getting, like, weekly keys done just for fun, just to get some more gear, then making your own group is just always going to be your best option. Just, and at this point, it's easy, right? Because effectively now, you do one M0 dungeon and you get what would be a +10 key completely for free, and now it can't even get pushed below that. So you have a great starting point, and you get a +2, and you can list your +2, and hey, you can be the one who's being picky, right? You know, just like there's a bunch of other DPS competing for those spots who are higher item level, well, if you're the group leader, I can guarantee you there's going to be a lot of people applying to your key who are a higher item level and just want to knock it out for whatever reason, and you get to invite them, and you get to build a really good group and, you know, push your key as much as possible. So that makes it a little bit easier. Okay, I need to kill field captains. Also, I forgot last time I did this, and well, I forgot again, but I need to go and pick up these quests before I do any of the stuff here, because I could have been killing field captains and getting credit for that other quest while doing this. But I did not. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, some little tips on making your own groups, though. One thing, never put an item level restriction. There's just no point, because the thing about item level restrictions, right, is if I am just applying for groups on my main, I don't really give a shit what item level people are. I kind of already expect that the groups that I'm going to be in are going to be, you know, with people who are low item level, and I'm probably going to be doing most of the work. Like, I did a run on my Guardian Druid the other day, not even my main. It was my, like, 495 alt. And I was top overall damage on a +2 Halls of Infusion by, like, a mile. And almost every single boss fight, all of the DPS would immediately die to mechanics, and then I'd spend 3 minutes with the healer just soloing the boss. And, like, yeah, that kind of sucks. And I already expect that it's going to be like that going in, but I will do the bare minimum cursory look at the group before I queue up, just to see, is this very obviously going to be a shit show? And one of the easiest ways for players like me to spot a shit show a mile away is a very low minimum item level requirement. If somebody has the minimum item level set to, like, genuinely, the other day, I saw minimum item level requirement of, like, 315 item level for a Mythic +2. And what that says to me, right out of the gate, is the person who is leading that group is 315 item level. Because if they are not 315 item level, why the fuck would they put the minimum item level requirement as Dragonflight questing greens that you replace within literal minutes of hitting max level? There's absolutely no reason that anybody would do that. Anybody who actually knows what they're doing in this game would either not set a minimum requirement or would set it much higher because they are higher item level. And sometimes you see it even lower. Like, you'll see 430 something item level or 440. And what that tells me is that the person took a break like mid season 3 and is just coming back and hasn't bothered replacing any of their stuff. And while that's obviously better than 315 item level, if I am looking at the group and I can already tell I am going to be carrying one of the DPS players, I'm just not going to apply for that group. And I'm going to apply for somewhere else. So if you're, like, really trying to form your own group, like, when I make my own groups, even though, like, I have high item level, I will usually just wait around a little while, and I will grab at least 2 other really high item level people. And if I get to the point where, like, we need only 1 or 2 more people, and, you know, the group is already pretty good, then I will focus more on, like, comp stuff. Like, for instance, if I'm forming a raid group, like the other week to help out one of my friends, I put together a raid group for normal Aberrus because we were struggling to get invited to any groups because, you know, my friend was brand new to the game and he didn't have any logs whatsoever. So most groups were like, link AOTC, blah, blah, blah. So I just said, fuck it, I'll make my own group. And I formed it from scratch. And that's what I did. For the first 20, 30 minutes of forming the group, I only took people who had, like, some heroic experience, who, like, kind of knew what they were doing. And then as we started to fill, I was a little bit more flexible. And it's like, okay, this guy doesn't have experience, but he has high item level. All right, I'll invite him. You know, we really want more warlocks so that we can get summons out. All right, I'll invite this warlock. And as long as they are not literally AFK, then I will keep them in the group. And I'll, you know, be a little bit more flexible and expand my choosings as we go. For dungeons, obviously, you have less spots, so it's a little bit more limited. But a lot of times, as the tank, for instance, I know that I do not need a good healer to keep myself alive. Unless it is a dungeon like Halls of Infusion, which has a ridiculous group healing requirement. Like Kajin, you need to have a good healer or everybody's just going to die. But if it's a dungeon that is primarily tank damage, and as long as the healer has like 2 brain cells, they can keep people alive, then I will sometimes just grab a low item level healer as long as, you know, they seem like they know what they're doing. Just because I'm like, I just want to get this dungeon going. I know that I can survive without a healer, and it's just like up to them to keep everybody else alive. So you can be a little bit more flexible. But if you are forming your own groups, I would say the most important thing to understand is kind of what makes a group good. And admittedly, that can be very hard as a new player. So a lot of times when people throw out that, you know, advice of just make your own group, herder, it's so easy. Well, I will say it is definitely the best way to get stuff. I do also like to provide that disclaimer of I understand it's not easy, and a lot of times it may help to, you know, be particular about who you're actually inviting. And one of the best skills that you can learn if you're just getting into World of Warcraft is how to analyze logs. And really just how to parse through data. And I'm not using parse as like the, you know, the World of Warcraft term of like parse is like what's your performance level, like just the standard word of how to sort through data, I guess is a better way of describing that, and say like which specs are good, which specs are bad, but more importantly, how to actually interpret that realistically. Like, you know, maybe Feral Druid's actually not bad right now, but historically, Feral Druid is a really bad spec. There's been a lot of years where it was considered to be terrible. But if I am looking through this guy's Warcraft logs, and I see this is like a purple parsing Feral Druid, and this other guy's like a Destro lock. Destro is really good, but this guy sucks ass. Well, then being able to understand that it is more optimal to bring somebody who is playing an off-meta spec but is like really good, instead of somebody who's playing like a meta spec but is really bad, that's important. And then, like I said, there are also some times where it doesn't even fucking matter, and just the fact that this guy can breathe and is a warlock means that he gets invited. Like, sometimes there is a fight that if you have a warlock gateway, it becomes 50 times easier. Well, being able to understand that and then say, okay, I'm going to invite a warlock on this fight no matter what, and just whisper him before the pull and say, hey buddy, I need you to place a warlock gateway from point A to point B. That's your entire job. I don't give a shit what else you do. And he does that, and then it, like, literally, once again, doesn't matter if he dies on pull, as long as that warlock gateway is there. Actually, technically, in this particular instance, if a warlock dies, their gateway goes away. But assuming he, you know, is able to stay alive in that case, that's all that really matters. You're about to say, wait, what the fuck? You finished your first character through Dragonflight, and you're 322? Yeah. And that's the thing. The only people who will put something like that, which is why, as I said, it was an immediate red flag to me, are people who just leveled through Dragonflight and don't understand anything about group composition, which tells me that I'm effectively going to be hard carrying somebody. And again, not that there is anything wrong with being a new player to Dragonflight. There absolutely is not. But the advice that I was giving was specifically in regards to how do you want to find optimal groups and stuff like that. And in that case, if all you care about is being efficient with your time, which I think most people do, then yeah, don't join groups where you're going to be playing with somebody who is brand new to Dragonflight and is effectively looking for a carry. And frankly, well, I did say there's absolutely nothing wrong with being new to the game, and that is true. At the same exact time, I think that a lot of people conflate the idea of, like, you should be helpful to new players with you should carry new players. And I am always against carrying people through content. If, like, a new player comes to me and they ask for help, and they're like, hey, I'm brand new to the game, can you give me tips on, like, how to get geared up? Absolutely, I am more than happy to give them as many tips as possible on, like, you know, where to find information, how to get gear, etc. But if a new player comes to me and they're like, hey, can you carry me through a dungeon? I'll say no. Work on it yourself, go through the steps that everybody else goes through to get their character caught up, and then do it like everybody else does, on level. But a lot of people try to skip that, and then they'll be like, you know, WoW is super toxic to new players. But I will be completely honest here. There are a lot of new players that are very entitled. And that is a very unpopular thing to say. You say that in the wrong circles in WoW, and you will get flamed and called extremely toxic for that. But I think it is very important for people to understand when they are behind and when they need to put in a little bit of legwork on their own to get caught up with everybody else. And like, I mean, I've been there. For years in WoW, I was that shitty player who couldn't get into any groups. Frankly, Cataclysm, right? I was a giga casual back in Cataclysm, and I never raided. I barely did heroic dungeons. I got flamed for like only using auto attacks back in heroic Halls of Reflection. I remember I got vote kicked once on my hunter because they told me stop only using auto attack, and I wasn't only using auto attack. I was actually really trying, and I was pressing my buttons. I was just so shit, and my gear was so bad. I was using like strength gear as a hunter, and I just couldn't do any real good damage, and I got vote kicked. And like, you know, I could have just been like, wow, those guys are toxic, but as a kid I immediately said, wow, I'm shit, I need to learn more and figure out how to get better. And it took me a while because I was still pretty shit even in Cataclysm, but I slowly started to learn. I tried other classes in Cata. I made my first real alt in Cataclysm, which was a Blood Death Knight, and I really liked Blood DK, and I started playing Blood DK a lot more through the end of Cata. I switched back to my Hunter for MOP launch, but I made a real concerted effort during MOP to like actually try to learn and understand Hunter a bit more. I still wasn't great, but I was like not completely dead weight. You know, amongst my group of friends, I was actually pulling my weight, though put me up with like a top world raider at that time, and I still got absolutely destroyed. And I know that that was true because I was friends with a world top raider, my friend Paul, who I've talked about before. He was in like a top 20 guild at the time. And whenever he would play with us, he would completely mop the floor with me and my friends, and it was just not even close. And the thing is though, Paul would sometimes like carry us through content for fun, but if I ever asked Paul to like help me out with something difficult, he would always basically do exactly what I said. He would basically say, here's the resources that you need to learn it yourself, go figure it out. And I've credited Paul many times over the years for he was the one who really taught me how to play WoW, but he was kind of like that, you know, a learning person or a teacher. I can't believe instead of teacher, I said learning person. What is wrong with my brain? But he was like my main teacher for endgame World of Warcraft content, because he would basically throw me into the deep end and basically say, figure it out yourself. And of course, if I asked him for advice, he would, you know, give me hints, but he would not make it easy on me. He kept throwing me in difficult situations. And when I would get confused and frustrated, he's like, you know, you got to figure it out on your own. That's the challenge. That is World of Warcraft, right? But, you know, he gave me like the tools that I needed to learn, and eventually I did learn. And more importantly, by the time that Legion rolled around, I had been, you know, kind of enveloped enough in that environment of like, you know, end game optimization and stuff that I understood the way in which those players thought. I was not on their level yet. I wasn't like a, you know, an end game cutting edge raider like I am now, but I was at least at a point where I understood the general way that the things that you need to do to get better at World of Warcraft. And I was able to seek out those resources on my own. And then it was just a question of how much effort was I willing personally to put in. I know where to look. I know what I need to do. And that's what I did. And I practiced. I actively told my friend Paul to stop like helping me. I wanted to figure it out on my own. I actually stopped playing with my group of friends that I'd played with up through MOP and WoD, and I just joined random guilds because I wanted to basically figure things out on my own. I wanted to throw myself into unfamiliar environments and see how well I can do left only to my own devices. And joining random guilds, I managed to... first off, I made a lot of really good friends doing that, meeting random people in Legion, people who are still my friends to this day, joining a random guild on Emerald Dream back in Nighthold. I met my friend Amar, who still friends with him to this day, and now we're like talking about Honkai Star Rail because we're both playing that. So, you know, a lot of times that's also a really good way to meet cool people who, you know, those friendships will go beyond WoW, right? But then, you know, I kept learning, and eventually I joined, I met some people in Mythic Plus. I joined a Mythic Progression Guild, a serious Mythic Progression Guild for Tomb of Sargeras. and I made it pretty far, and then some other people I met from in Mythic Plus were looking for a tank because they had just lost theirs, which in hindsight, I kind of understand why, but they had a tank opening for really late into the tier, and I got to skip ahead a few bosses. I skipped Mistress Sazine and most of progression on Maiden of Vigilance, and I killed Maiden, and then I did Avatar and KJ Prog, and I got my first cutting edge on Mythic KJ, which is... I'm definitely in hindsight very happy with, because that is considered to be, to this day, one of the hardest cutting edges, and it was the first time I got cutting edge, so I was quite pleased with myself. And then from then on, I got cutting edge on and off, and now, like, the last, I don't know, fucking 4 or 5 years, I've gotten cutting edge every single tier, so. Just takes practice. You gotta slowly get through there. I missed a lot of messages in chat, though. Let me scroll up and read. You remember that from Wrath? You were new but looked up videos and stuff. You still sucked. Yeah, and that's the thing. That is why I try to, in a lot of my videos, I try to strike a good balance between, you know, I want to give people enough information, right, to figure things out. Like, I don't want to just leave you completely guessing. But there are a lot of times where I will, like, I'm not just going to sit there and spell it out for you. And, like, for instance, in my Bullion video, I'll tell you, these are the 2 best ones, but if you really want to know beyond then, check your class Discord. And in a lot of my videos aimed at, like, endgame raiders, I'm like, if you really want to learn this stuff, sim yourself, check your class Discord, do this research on your own. Because there is only so much information that you can really, truly get by watching videos. At a certain point, you need to internalize that information and understand, like, how did I get that Bullion information? I am not omnipotent. I do not magically understand all of the information in this game just by, like, you know, looking at it, like, playing World of Warcraft for 5 minutes. I magically know the exact Bullion priority for every single spec in the game. No. I do not play every single spec in the game, nor do I pretend to play every spec in the game, as some YouTubers do. There are YouTubers who will make guides for every single fucking spec, and it's like, fuck off. You are not qualified to make a guide for a spec that you do not play. I mean, I barely even make guides for specific specs in general, and in the very few cases I do, it is when I'm, like, literally top 5 in the world for it. That is, like, my barrier to entry for when I consider it to be okay for somebody to, like, really, really make, like, a spec guide. And there are people who just make generic filler garbage guides for things they just have never touched. But that's the thing, like, so how do I understand all of this information, right, for what all of the best Bullion options are? Well, I do my research. I have friends who play a lot of those specs. There are resources online, class Discords, and I know that a lot of the people in those class Discords are reliable sources. So I will go ahead and I will look, like, on those different pages and see what are these theory crafters recommending. Sometimes it's obvious, like, okay, the Ret Paladins are recommending that you take Firalath and Signet Brand. Duh. That's not really a surprise. But then I see something like, you know, Mistweavers are recommending Quake detecting Seismostaff. Okay, well, that's weird, and I don't really understand it. So then I'll message one of my Mistweaver friends and be like, hey, you're knowledgeable about the spec. Can you explain to me why this is something that Mistweavers are prioritizing? Like, what is the logic behind this? And I'll try to seek out that information on my own to understand it. And that way I take all the information that I get from other sources and I try to condense it down into, like, an understandable format and share it with other people. But at a certain point, understanding, like, the best thing that anybody can do is reach that point on their own and be able to seek out that information without watching one of my videos. That is what I hope that everybody who watches my videos will eventually do. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean my videos are useless, because there are still things that I discover and include in videos that even my Mythic rating friends are like, what the fuck? A good example is, like, the tier set bonuses. That was something that I just had a hunch. I'm like, I wonder if you can catalyze the old tier set bonuses at a higher level. Just this one, like, basically like a shower thought. Like, I wonder if that works. And I just decided to test it on my own, and it fucking worked. And then I shared it with all my friends, and all of them were like, holy shit, I can't believe that's actually a thing. And then, hey, I made a video out of it. So sometimes it just works out like that. But there are a lot of, like, guides that I make which are primarily directed at, you know, brand new players, which that information, ideally, you should be able to figure out on your own, given enough years and practice and stuff. But obviously, you know, you gotta go through all those steps to reach the point where you can figure it out on your own. There's no shame in seeking out help. It's just, eventually you want to progress through the stages, if that makes sense. Anyways, let me keep reading. You did your research on the mechanics. Yeah, doing some research like that is absolutely 100 times better than doing no research at all. The people who jump into raids without having done any research whatsoever, massive pet peeve of mine, yeah. Because at that point, you know that you're throwing. If somebody's at least trying, and they clearly have a basic understanding of what they should be doing, that's really all anybody can ask. Also, I genuinely do not know if I've ever done this vashj'ir intro on Alliance. Because, frankly, I did not start playing... my very first ever... Well, I played Alliance in vanilla, original vanilla. My first ever character was a dwarf warrior. But by the time of TBC, I had already swapped to Horde. And the next time that I ever created an Alliance character was I had... my Warlords of Draenor pre-order boost I used on a human rogue. Specifically, which actually, I named my human rogue Arya. Very creative, I know. But, you know, at the time it was however many years ago, and Game of Thrones had just come out, and I was, like, really into Game of Thrones. So, I boosted a human rogue named Arya. And that was the first Alliance character that I had played in a very long time. And that wasn't until the very end of Mists. So I do vaguely remember the Alliance intro quests for Mists of Pandaria, and I have done them a few times, at the very least in Jade Forest once or twice. So that I'm a little bit more familiar with. But I never played any Alliance characters. What the hell? Oh my god, look at it go! Holy shit! Aquatic form fucking flies. Okay, yeah, fuck Sea Turtle. This is... Wow. I'm pretty sure the Seahorse is faster. But just... the fact that the animation gets sped up along with it is so fucking good. Oh my god. That's fucking amazing. Yeah, for the record, my current plan is, I'm gonna do vashj'ir up to, at the very least, 82. I'm not gonna go any further than that. I don't think this is faster than Hygel, I should note. The reason I'm doing this is specifically to test the Alliance intro. And because I can't actually switch zones until 82, even if this does connect up with where the Horde quests, I'm just going to do this until 82, that way the next stream we can seamlessly jump into 82 to 85. You pop Worgen Racial too. I will try that in a second. Let me see. I want to finish reading the other messages real quick. You knew what you were fucking up instead of just running in? Yeah, for sure. You do find it much more daunting now to get into the actual endgame because you have no idea where to start and you don't want to be that guy. I do, yeah, I completely understand that. It's, that is a video series that I actually debated making earlier in the expansion. It was something that I thought about, and it was just one of those... I had a lot of other stuff to cover. I forget what it was that caused me to not make that video series. Because I did strongly consider making it. Also, hello? Are all of these crabs evade bugged? What is going on? Is everything evade bugged? Hello? Am I evade bugged? What is happening? Also, I'll try popping Darkflight. So we can see my movement speed. My swim speed is 371%. Okay, yeah, it doesn't... Darkflight doesn't affect swim speed at all. I don't really know what's happening right now. Why? Every single mob is just evade bugging. This is not supposed to happen. Yeah, something is very broken here. I mean, this is kind of just like, welcome to the Cataclysm beta, if we're being honest. Of course, my dungeon queue timer is... It might just be that these mobs are broken. I'm pretty sure that I can kill the ones outside the horde area, too. So I'm going to check to see if these ones are working. It literally... Okay, it's... For whatever reason, the mobs outside the Alliance ship are bugged. The ones outside the horde ship work perfectly fine. What the actual fuck? That is such a weird way for it to break. I mean, like... Why? It's the same exact mobs. Yeah, like, I can get quest credit by killing these guys. What the fuck? Man, this game is so broken. I mean, at this point, there's absolutely no way, unfortunately, that they're delaying it, but... I mean... It really does not bode well for the future of Classic if this shitty fucking dev team can't release an old game even remotely well put together. And the amount of bugs that we've just had are completely unacceptable. This should not be going live the way that it is. This is fucking terrible. And I say that as somebody who is very excited for Cataclysm and wants it to succeed. But it is... Like, this is not even a hard to find bug. It's like the fucking first 5 quests in the zone. Did nobody test vashj'ir on Alliance side? Hello? Blizzard? Come on. Do your fucking jobs. Oh my goodness. I just need these 3. Depth perception is really fucking hard underwater, though. So it looks like I'm fighting 5. But yeah, oh, so what I was saying before is... When I initially conceptualized my alt catch-up guide, the very first version, which I have continued to iterate on because that was well-received, like the gearing guide and stuff, I initially envisioned it as like a multi-part series where I start off by saying, here's how you get fresh item level, and then here are all the ways to get into endgame content, starting with, like, you know, how to read logs, etc., etc. And I was going to do, like, a multi-part thing, and I genuinely forget what the reason was that, like, I didn't have time. There was some other really important thing. I think it was just, like, leveling speedruns. Like, for whatever reason, there was, like, some new thing that came out that I needed to test for leveling speedruns, and I consider that to be, like, a higher priority, so I just didn't get around to it. And it's something that I definitely want to try in War Within. And I'm probably going to try, like, a different format where one of the issues that I have with, like, catch-up gearing guides now is crafting gear is still, like, a very important part of getting caught up in, what's it called? In Dragonflight right now. But I can't exactly include a section on crafting gear in my catch-up guide because for, like, a lot of returning players who already played the launch, it's just the same information as before. And I'd just be having like a 5-minute segment on something that they already know about, and that kills your viewer retention. So I try to keep the guides generally applicable, and a lot of times if there is something that I think is a little bit more niche, I will link a separate video on it. The only issue is because I didn't make that series early on into the expansion, I can't do that for some stuff like crafting. So my plan for the War Within is to, like, make a, you know, alt catch-up guide or just catch-up guide in general as I normally do. And then on the launch, I'm going to make like generalized how to get, like, crafting gear, etc. And depending on how novel it is, if it's like the same as in Dragonflight, I might make a second channel video about it. Because, like, stuff on the second channel, if it performs poorly, it doesn't impact the algorithm at all. But that way, it's still a public video that people can very easily find. And that way, if I make, like, an updated alt catch-up guide for patch, I don't know, 11.1 or whatever we get in, like, the War Within, then I can just be like, here, you can check out my crafting guide from, you know, the launch of Dragonflight, and it's exactly the same. And that way, if there are very minor changes to crafting in the next expansion, then I can make a second channel video going over those changes. And if it doesn't matter, let's say if 100 people watch that video, because most people don't care, well, I don't care about the performance of videos in the second channel, because once again, it doesn't impact the algorithm at all. So I can do that, and then for those 100 people, it's a massive help.
And for all of the hundreds of people that didn't watch it, the algorithm doesn't fuck me over. That's at least my plan going forward. And as for other catch-up stuff, like how to get into endgame content, because like, what was it that you said? You find it much more daunting now to get into endgame content, to get into endgame content because you don't know where to start. And I think that's kind of a universal difficulty for MMOs in general. Like, I would actually say World of Warcraft still has that problem, but if we're being real, Final Fantasy has it worse. Guild Wars 2 has it worse. And, like, I love those games, but Final Fantasy's transition into endgame content is awful. It does a very terrible job of actually setting you up to get into Savage Raids if that's what you want to do. There is no transition process whatsoever. It's pretty much you either force your way in with no real understanding, and I tried to do that, and as somebody who had been Mythic raiding in World of Warcraft for years, I still found it quite challenging trying to find the resources available to get caught up, because it's just a very, very difficult transition process. I was carried by the fact that I had general raiding knowledge that was somewhat transferable from World of Warcraft, and I could at the very least tell people, hey, I've been Mythic raiding in World of Warcraft for like, I don't know, 15, I guess Mythic raiding I've only been doing for like 10 years-ish. Yeah, about 10 years. And that, at the time, it was less, but still, when you tell people you've been, doing World of Warcraft raiding for a really long time, they're like, okay, so you probably understand this, and it's easy for them to explain things to you. But for a brand new player, it's like basically impossible. World of Warcraft, at the very least, the only challenge really is finding a guild. Some of the information is difficult, right? But like, for instance, what do you need to do to get into a Mythic raiding guild? Really just find a team that matches your times and is willing to give you a shot. And I guess, frankly, the willing to give you a shot part can be a little bit tricky. Because, like, you can find a team that meets your times, but if they're expecting somebody who already has extensive Mythic experience, which, I'll be honest, most guilds are. And what is going on here? That is weird. Like, for instance, if the guild that I'm in right now, or frankly, most of the guilds that I've joined over the recent years, if they're recruiting for players, I'll be completely honest. If somebody applied and they said, like, I have never done Mythic raiding before, I would say immediately decline. Now, that being said, getting into guilds like this is not, going to be your immediate priority as, like, a brand new player. But there is definitely a curve to it in World of Warcraft. And unfortunately, it's not like Final Fantasy or other games where you can reasonably clear all of the content, right? Like, even in classic World of Warcraft, for instance, a casual dad guild can still clear all of the heroic raids in Cataclysm. It's going to be probably a good bit harder than it was in, like, Vanilla or even Wrath, but they are not insurmountable challenges. But there are only, I don't know, like a few hundred guilds that have killed Mythic Varrock. That's not true. That's not true. At this point, by the end of the tier, how many guilds killed it? I think in like the last like month or few weeks after the nerfs, like around 1,000 guilds killed it. So I guess, yeah, if your goal is to just get cutting edge by the final day of the season, which is true for a lot of people, then there's only a few thousand options available to you, right? And only a few hundred that, if we're being honest, are any good. A lot of guilds around the 1,000 range effectively crawl into cutting edge by, like, brute forcing it, which I've been there. There's nothing wrong with it, but I'm going to be honest, it's not something I would ever want to go back to. And while it may be a necessary step if you're, brand new to raiding, it's not necessarily the most fun. It's kind of funny because, like, a lot of people look at hardcore raiding and they're like, they look at the hours that I have to play, and I'm not even in, like, a super duper hardcore guild. I am in, like, I guess it is hardcore in the sense of, like, the average player base, but I am not in, like, a liquid guild or, like, a day raiding guild or anything even remotely at that level. My guild is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and they raid 3 hours on each of those days. And there's like expectations outside of raid of like, you know, you should be doing your mythic plus, filling your vault, blah 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 blah, keeping up with your character, etc. Basic expectations for endgame guilds, but like that might seem like a lot to people. It's like, wow, you raid 12 hours a week? That's insane. And the reality though, okay, there we go, finally. That quest is so fucking long. The reality of that stuff is, while it may seem like I spend so much time during the week raiding and stuff like that, across an entire season, I actually probably spend less time actually raiding than people in those like rank 1000, rank 2000 guilds who are crawling across the finish line at the last second. Because yeah, sure, we raid a lot early on in the season. We do a lot of Mythic Plus early on in the season. But we finish the tier by like month 2, month 3. And then I have, depending on how long the season is, obviously Dragonflight has been way more accelerated, but I have anywhere from like 3 to 5 months of farm. Just super chill, laid back farm where, frankly, by like week 3 or 4, you're usually clearing in a single night. And then you're only raiding 3 to 4 hours every single week. And that's really chill. Not only is it like not much time, but it's just way more relaxed. Farm clears are so much more fun than like really messy progression. Obviously, like progression is my favorite time of raiding when you're you know, really trying to learn a boss and stuff, especially with a group that's actually good. But the worst situation to be in by far is a guild that is just slamming their face into a boss over and over and over with like really no idea what the fuck they're doing. And out of all of that, farm is like considerably better. It is just fun. And like, while I enjoy the challenge of mythic raiding, and I definitely wouldn't trade it for anything else, it is way less stressful to just show up for 3 hours, blast a couple of bosses, and, you know, just vibe with your friends than it is to spend 12 hours a week learning difficult mechanics. It is a fun experience, if that's what you're looking for, which I am, but it is a lot of work. There we go. This quest is annoying. Yeah, I wonder... I feel like vashj'ir can't possibly be efficient just because of how much roleplay is just embedded into the quests. Like, the thing about the middle zone, Shimmering Expanse, honestly was not that bad. There's, like... There's some decent quest hubs there, which weren't too inefficient. But, like, this shit... Oh, and, like, that whole long RP section where it's just, like, 3 minutes for a single quest. There is absolutely no way in which this is going to be faster than Hyjal. I mean, we kind of already figured that out in the Paladin run, but... Yeah. I've already caught up to where the factions merge, so... I'm just gonna jump off the moment I hit... There we go. Jump off the moment I hit 82. I think this is account-wide, yeah, so it doesn't matter. Actually, come to think of it, because it is account-wide, I could have probably just used it from the get-go. And this is definitely faster than, Actually, wait, is it? Wait, hold on a second. My movement speed is 371%. Oh, shit. Aquatic form with the glyph is actually just as fast as the seahorse. It looks derpy as hell, but it is actually just fast. Alright. That actually makes Druid so much fucking better for vashj'ir than literally anything else. You don't lose any speed, you get it right out of the gate, and... like, you can now interact with stuff on your mount instead of having to, like, stop, remount. That's just good. That is really, really fucking good. Anyways, let me... Also, like, I mean, how can you not love that animation? That is just, it's too fucking good. Let me scroll up, read the other stuff that I missed. you started in Shadowlands and was terrified to do even regular dungeons as a Guardian Druid. I feel that. Like, yeah, even Wicked Engineer, I think, am I remembering that correctly, said he also agrees. I do think that there is a certain element, and I don't, for the record, I don't blame you for being afraid of tanking dungeons, but like, you could tank regular dungeons with very, very, very little experience. One of my main goals in like a lot of my videos when I talk about tanks and stuff is to try and alleviate tanxiety. Like my main goal for my dungeon guides is usually to make things as approachable for new tanks as possible. And show them, like, really, this is not that hard for you. It's really not that bad. Because I think a lot of people are just terrified of tanking in general, and, well, in case you couldn't already tell, I love tanking. On any class, any game, unless, you know, the actual game design is super fucking terrible, tanking is usually the most fun role for me. So I definitely want to get more people interested in tanking, because I think a lot of people are missing out because they're just afraid of fucking up. And it's like, you can fuck up on any role, and, you know, it doesn't need to be a tank, you know? DPS can fuck up just as much as tanks can fuck up. And, what's it called? There's a quest called Sunken Crate. I don't know if I can do that right now. Man, I kind of wish that I had saved vashj'ir to do on the Druid. This would have saved me like 4 hours of agony on the Paladin if I just said, oh yeah, I'm testing vashj'ir as a Druid. At the same time, though, it wouldn't have exactly been the most, like, universal comparison had I actually waited. Where are the keepsakes? I'm still missing 2. I guess there's a wide range. They can apparently be all around the floor. Yeah, I should just... I don't want to look around just the ship. Yeah, I mean, the only tricky part for tanks is they are somewhat expected to know the routes of the dungeons. But the other thing that I think a lot of people who are new to tanking aren't super comfortable doing is a lot of people lack a particular skill. And this skill is crucial, absolutely mandatory if you want to be really good at tanking. And it's something that I think a lot of people overlook when they're giving advice for tanks. And that skill is you need to be able to tell people to fuck off. Plain and simple. If somebody's giving you shit, just say, fuck off, and then stop responding to them. If somebody's like, tank, you know, you're like, you're shit, you didn't need to pull these mobs, you know, we could have saved like 30 seconds and, you know, we're going over percent. I just type in party chat, fuck off, and I just keep pulling. Like, fuck that guy. If some random turbo nerd is sitting there complaining that, like, you know, you're missing perfect percent, blah, 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 just tell him to fuck off. It doesn't fucking matter. And obviously, look, if you're playing, I'm not saying tell your friends to fuck off, right? But this is especially good advice for pugs, because you are going to get those absolute fucking losers who think it is the end of the world if you overcount by like 2%. And they'll give you no fucking end of grief. I get these people all the time, still, in pugs. And I'm just like, you know, I get that. I get that in like 3 chest dungeons where we're absolutely destroying it. And somebody's like, oh, you didn't do the route correctly. Oh, you should have done this skip. And oh, we're losing 30 seconds. And I'm just like, who the fuck asked, dude? Like, just fucking press your buttons. That, honestly, I usually don't go with... I'm being a little bit hyperbolic by, like, saying fuck off, right? Because, generally speaking, it's not good to be inflammatory. A lot of times, I just straight up ignore it, is what I do. But if somebody is really, really, really just making a big fuss about it and won't shut up, I will just type in chat, just press your buttons, man. Like, something like that. Basically, shut up and DPS. Like, you do not need to fucking worry about whether we are 30 seconds slow. If the dungeon is completed and we get the fucking loot, shut the fuck up. And a lot of people can't do that if they're new. And I don't really blame them. It's a difficult skill. Not everybody is confrontational, and I'm not saying you need to be confrontational, but not everybody is good at conflict. And if somebody starts harassing them and giving them shit, you know, they will get really scared and nervous and stuff like that. And is it good that that is an unfortunate but necessary skill that you need to have online? No, it's not good. I wish that was not the case. I wish more than anything that everybody was nice and, you know, tanks didn't need to have thick skin because, you know, you would never hear shit from other people. But that's just not the world we live in. And the reality of tanking is you just need to be ready to have people say dumb shit to you, and you just need to be able to tell them to fuck off. And if you can do that, that's like half of the challenge of tanking taken care of right there. Because, like, you're never going to learn unless you get practice. And a lot of idiots online will expect you to automatically be a master of every single possible tanking route, and you don't need to be. You can still clear the dungeons when you haven't done it before, just by feeling it out. I mean, how the fuck do you think I do test dungeons on the PTR when, like, we've never seen it before? I just feel it out. And guarantee you the first few times I do a dungeon, I'm gonna make a routing mistake because we've never fucking seen it before. But then I think to myself, oh, okay, I could have skipped that mob. I'll do it better next time. And after a lot of practice, you get better. So just ignore the assholes and focus on improving, and, you know, don't worry about whether you get it absolutely 100% correct immediately. Where? Oh. It's off this mob. What the hell? Where is the hitbox? I have no idea where I'm supposed to be aiming. I guess I'm in range here, so we'll just do this. Alright. I love the fucking swim form. They want a bitch, just brick their key. Yeah. Pretty much.
Hey there. See you later. See you around. See you later.
That ring replaces one of the things I'm missing. 232.
Hello.
Hey there. Have a good one.
Alright. At this point, the quest, as I said before, is exactly the same as it was for Alliance and Horde. There are very, very, very marginal differences. Like, for instance, you have a slightly different cave that you go into in this part of, what's it called? I think it's here, in Shimmering Expanse. That final Horde cave, when you go up to the ship, you go up to the Alliance boat instead. Abyssal Depths is marginally different, because the Horde cave is like here, the Alliance cave is a bit further south. That's pretty much it. And it's like you do almost exactly the same quests, except effectively the zone is inverted. And Alliance have a slight advantage in Kelp'thar Forest because they start near all of these hubs, because their boat is a little bit closer, whereas the Horde is over here, and they have to swim all the way over here to get to a lot of that stuff. So a little bit of an Alliance advantage there. And then in Abyssal Depths, the Horde starts up here. Their quests, like, everybody will go up to this area. Everybody does free, will high. Everybody does the stuff on this shelf up here, this little area. And the stuff in this, like, little trench, everybody does, except Alliance approach it from, like, a different angle. And there's a lot of empty area in the bottom left of Abyssal Depths that you just don't really use. But effectively, the quest lines are exactly the same. It's just where you go and the people you talk to are slightly different for effectively the exact same quests. What is Debbie doing? I assume Debbie's testing world first cooking. Also, so I'm done with vashj'ir. But what I'm going to do real quick is, because somebody requested it the last stream, and then I forgot to do this, I'm going to go find the whale shark and die to it, just for fun. Also, while I'm here, one of my favorite, like, experiences was, I forget when I did this, but I explored out of bounds, like, along the edges of the water in vashj'ir, And there's like some really cool shit out here. I mean, for starters, like, that's fatigue water. And look at that. There's still stuff out in fatigue water. I don't know how far I can go before it hits me with fatigue. But one of the coolest things in WoW, in my opinion, and like as a kid, one of the things that like really just captured my imagination about this game and like, you know, makes you, oh yeah, there's fatigue waters. It gives you this sense that like it's a real world, is we're out in literally the middle of nowhere. There almost nobody is ever going to come here. And there's actually stuff out here decorating it. Somebody in my guild linked a tweet from Ghostcrawler. I think it was Ghostcrawler a day or two ago, where he said that the limited use cases he could see for AI in gaming is for doing stuff like the seafloor, like this. Because he said that in World of Warcraft, kind of the bitch duty job, he didn't use the term bitch duty, but, you know, just that's kind of what he's referring to. The bitch duty job for a level designer is creating the ocean floor, because they wanted to make it look pretty and they wanted to make it look like a place that people were actually living in, and that had life and stuff like that. But they knew that nobody was going to actually see it. So it sucked having to dedicate all of this time into creating, like, you know, a really pretty landscape for the ocean floor when nobody's going to actually interact with it. And in this case, obviously, it's underwater. You're probably going to see it. But imagine the waters around a land continent. I'll give you an example. The waters around the Dragonflight zones, they added the little fun Easter egg of the eyeball of N'Zoth or whatever underwater, and then Wowhead made like 50 million clickbait articles about, what does it mean that there's an eyeball underneath the water in Dragonflight? And then the developers literally changed it to a model of an Easter egg as a way of saying, calm the fuck down, Wowhead. It was just a fun little thing that we did, you know, with the like out of bounds zones. This was not actually meant to be, you know, a super secret N'Zoth theory or whatever. But that's the kind of stuff where the developers put in all of this, like, you know, care and detail into the out of bounds areas. And, you know, while I may be critical of a lot of the World of Warcraft dev teams, the art team is usually pretty good. There are certain areas where I feel like it has kind of fallen off a little bit in Dragonflight, but overall, still much better, definitely better than the other teams. And I mean, the art teams in older expansions, mwah, chef's kiss. And vashj'ir, say what you will about the questing experience and all that, this zone is just, it is beautiful. Everything about this zone is just a work of art. It is an absolute masterpiece. It is so amazingly thematic, and like the fact that now we're getting deeper and like the water is darker, and it gives you this like really just creepy, foreboding sense. It's like I watch a lot of videos on YouTube about, like, you know, scuba diving and like underwater submarine disasters and stuff, which it's like part of the reason why I find that interesting is because I'm actually a PADI certified scuba diver, which is something I don't know if I've ever really said, but my dad wanted to get a scuba diving certified years ago, and he wanted me to do it with him, so I said, sure. I believe this is the Alliance hub, yeah. So I got scuba diving certified. The thing is, while my dad does crazy shit pretty much all the time, I am not, like, nearly as big of a risk taker as my dad is. I am generally a relatively cautious person. And I followed all of, like, the scuba diving safety stuff to a T. And credit to my dad, you know, he is safe. He does very ambitious things, like skydiving, scuba diving, blah, blah, blah. But he is always safe about it. But I'm still very nervous doing a lot of that stuff. And, you know, when you're learning about scuba diving, they will give you all of these effectively horror stories as a way of basically saying, you better not fuck this shit up, because if you do, you're probably going to die, and here's proof. And they will tell you about, yeah, there's this one time back in the 1800s, this guy came up too fast, and he had bubbles in his blood, and then basically his arteries exploded or whatever. I don't know exactly how the bends works, but the bends is what I'm talking about. And, like, it just sounds terrifying. Like, there's air in your blood that slowly it causes it to expand, and like your inner arteries are expanding, and it's no. Just absolutely freaks me the fuck out. But you can guarantee that when I am scuba diving, I am taking the necessary decompression stops, because even if I am like scared of the scuba diving itself, I am infinitely more scared of what might happen if I don't follow the safety regulations, because I have had that drilled into me by the instructors repeatedly. And there's, I mean, so many different horror stories. Like, some of the scariest ones are how when you're going underwater, you can like lose sense of how fast you're traveling, because like all of your surroundings look really similar and you don't really think about it. But when we are traveling at like fast speeds, we use our surroundings as a way to gauge how fast we're moving. And it's like, if everything past you is moving by really quickly, we're like, oh wow, this must be moving really fast. But when you're underwater and all you can see around you, it's like pitch black, and it's just, you just see black, dark water, you could be moving at the speed of like a really fast sports car, and it could feel like you're just slowly going through the water, because you just have no frame of reference. So unless you have an advanced scuba diving equipment that can really tell this stuff, you could end up sinking hundreds of meters down below your intended level and reach a point where you're like, effectively, it's impossible for you to get back up. You have passed your depth limit. You now do not have enough oxygen to return to the surface. And it is fucking horrifying. And this, I don't know, every time I go into the zone, it just gives me that sense. And it's just, it gives me that, like, that dread, especially in abyssal depths, of like, oh my god, it's like, I'm going really deep into the ocean. And I don't know, it is, what's it called? Thalassophobia. I think to a certain extent I have thalassophobia, which is why I hated the idea of becoming scuba diving certified. But at the same time, there is like no better way to get over your fears than by, you know, facing it head on. And you can bet your ass that I did that by learning how to scuba dive. Yeah, nitrogen bubbles building up in your blood. That's what I'm thinking of. Oh, fuck. I just hit a kill plane. But one of the other, the main reason I came out here, look really far out there. I don't know if I can zoom in. There's something out in the distance beyond the fatigue waters, and it's glowing. And like, imagine being like, you know, an 11-year-old kid, and like you're just exploring around the edges of vashj'ir, and you just see that shit out in the distance. And oh man, it's so fucking cool. So fucking cool. And if I remember correctly, I think there's like a post on Wowpedia which explains what that is. It's like beyond the kill plane. I'm glad that I was able to see it. I wonder if, I don't know if my view distance isn't up all the way. Nah, you can't see any further because it's the darkness of the water that's obscuring it. But it's like a gigantic glowing pearl, and there's, I think, like a dead sea creature skeleton out there. It's so fucking cool. Anyways, it takes me to Silver Pine Forest for some fucking reason. Underwater exploration is so cool until Subnautica existed. I still have yet to play Subnautica, though. I probably should. The thing is, it's like, as cool as I think this is, like I said, it simultaneously freaks me out. So I've always been terrified of the idea of playing Subnautica because I've seen clips of it, and it seems really fucking scary. Also, I'm going to pause the timer here. I probably should have paused the timer when I swam out into fatigue waters. I'm just going to read the other messages in chat real quick, and I'm going to take myself out of a rested area so I get minimal rested experience, and it doesn't influence the next run. And yeah, there's like nobody queuing up for dungeons. Oh well. Yeah, 20. It doesn't matter though. That's the thing. It's like, you know, I'm mostly doing this just for testing purposes for routing. The final time I'm not too concerned about. I'm more just testing to see generally how efficient everything feels. Prey isn't a horror game, but it is spacewalking, which scares the shit out of you. Yeah, space is spooky too. Lots of spooky stuff like that. Yeah, it's... It's I don't generally like horror games, but I like the idea of horror. And then I usually it freaks me out. But like I keep forcing myself to confront things that freak me out because like I try to desensitize myself to it, if that makes sense. Anyways, let me scroll up and read all the messages that I missed while I was talking about scuba diving. You prefer the horde races, Voidborn elves don't come for a while? Yeah, true. As a former tank, you hate to hate on tanks, but you made a group, tank didn't do a mechanic twice, and then left feels bad? Yeah. I mean, obviously, if a tank is literally just not doing anything, obviously explain it to them first. You know, that should be a no-brainer. I'm sure everybody here understands that and would do the same. But if you explain something to a tank and they don't do it, yeah, you have every right to be annoyed. Don't be toxic. But I'll give you an example. That normal Aberrus pug that I discussed earlier in the stream, I effectively had to carry all of the tank mechanics because every single time before the boss, I would whisper the other tank and I'd be like, okay, do you know how to do this boss? And he would say, yep. And I'd say, okay, just to be safe, I'm going to be taunting at this point. Can you taunt at that point to make sure that we're swapping the debuff correctly? He says, sounds good. And then we pull the boss and he does everything wrong. Like on certain bosses, he managed to do everything so completely wrong that I'm just like, what the actual fuck is he doing? Like, for instance, Sarkareth, I told him, I will do all of the tank swap stuff in phase 1 and phase 2. You basically don't even need to taunt off in phase 1. And he didn't. I solo tanked phase 1 because the thing about phase 1 Sarkareth is you get a stacking fire debuff, and the only thing that forces a swap is after the debuff expires, it explodes and deals increased raid-wide damage for how many stacks you have. So if you have like 4 stacks, it's going to one-shot the group. I took 4 stacks, but the thing about P1 Sarkareth is if you go into the downstairs phase when your debuff expires, then it will not do any damage to the group. So I timed the P1 push right around when my stacks were about to fall off, and my fire stacks exploded in the downstairs phase, and nobody took any damage. So it didn't matter that he didn't taunt. Same thing for Sarkareth P2. As long as you run out of the group and drop your bomb off, it doesn't matter if you take another stack. So it's kind of whatever. P3, the only thing I told this guy is I said, okay, literally all that matters. Phase 3, I am going to aim the boss at skull marker. I put down a skull marker. I said, I will aim the boss here. When I am tanking the boss, do not be standing on skull marker. Do not stand in front of the boss. He says, okay, I understand. And then I said, you're going to stand off to the side. When I get hit by the boss frontal, you will taunt. Okay, I understand. What does he do? Immediately in phase 3, runs over to skull marker, takes the fucking tank buster. I'm like, are you fucking shitting me? You had one job! But then worse yet, I had to go down and drop off my debuff. He, surprised, did not go down and drop his debuff, so he blows up and hits the raid. It's not a wipe though, but everybody takes a lot of damage. So I come back up after dropping off my debuff, and I managed to taunt Sarkareth before the next debuff went out, because he actually didn't have threat on the boss. That's how bad this guy was. And another person took the tank debuff, and they actually went and dropped it off. And then I taunted the boss back. I got it back into position, and he runs on top of me. The other tank, he runs over and stands on me. And I'm literally, I popped Stampeding Roar, and I am kiting Sarkareth around the room. And he goes into cat form, and he presses dash to keep up with me. And I'm running around the room trying to aim the Sarkareth frontal away from him, and he is literally chasing me down in dash. I'm like, what are you doing? You are going out of your way to wipe the raid. But the thing is, I genuinely don't know how this guy's brain was so small, because I think that he actually believed he was doing it correctly. Because after the fact, he said, GG's, man, thanks for the group. And, he was really nice. He was like, thanks for giving me tips on tanking. As if nothing had just happened. It was just completely oblivious, friendly. And I just said, yeah, you're welcome, I guess. I wanted to tear this guy's head off. And, he didn't even realize he was doing anything wrong. And he thought I was a great teacher, and I was being really helpful. And I'm just like, I guess if that's your takeaway from this, but you did not listen to a single fucking word I said. And we almost wiped. We somehow one-shot Sarkareth. It was not fucking easy, but I I was literally, because I was in Discord with my friend, and I was like screaming at the top of my lungs, like, what is he doing? It just, oh my god, it drove me fucking insane. That was admittedly one of the worst co-tank situations in a pug I've ever run into, where I'm just genuinely at a loss of what the fuck is going through their head. Like, how? Usually it's not that bad. Usually, if I explain to them in very clear steps, this is what you should be doing, they listen. But I don't know, man. I don't fucking know. Anyways. You're only tanking XP before starting WoW 3 weeks ago. Was Final Fantasy Dark Knight and Death Knight plays pretty similar? Yeah, I would say so. And you fell in love with DH. Yeah, see, I love the thematic elements of DH tanking. DH, when it is good, is my favorite tank. Right now, Vengeance Demon Hunter is fucking awful to play. The playstyle feels absolutely miserable. It's strong, but it's just so fucking boring. Every other tank is just more fun right now. Except Blood Decay's not the most fun. But, you know. It's almost illegal to play dungeons for fun, yeah. Where was I reading? That's where I left off. Final Fantasy having threat swap so easily? Yeah. Threat in Final Fantasy is much easier to manage compared to WoW. Because, like, the thing about Final Fantasy rotations, especially as a tank, if you're pressing even remotely the right buttons in Final Fantasy, you hold threat. And you have to actively ignore every single tutorial that the game throws at you to not understand the rough basic rotation for tanking in Final Fantasy. That is a very clear difference between WoW and really most other MMOs, but Final Fantasy especially will force you through those tutorials and hold your hand almost too much, but I'm glad that it does to an extent, because very few people manage to make it to max level with no idea of what they're doing. World of Warcraft, you could basically roll your face on your keyboard with absolutely no understanding of what class you're playing, and you will eventually make it to max level. And then you could somehow end up in a dungeon with people who do understand their class, and it will just be a disaster waiting to happen. So, you know. I see, that's the thing. I like Vengeance's utility sigils, and the thing that I used to love about Vengeance is their utility sigils when they were well tuned. Because it used to be that there were multiple forms of, like, crowd control, and Sigil of Silence, Sigil of Misery, they were very unique ways to crowd control mobs, and it felt really good to use them correctly. And that was one of the main things that made me able to push dungeons as Vengeance back when it was considered to be one of the worst tanks, because I did have a very good understanding of how those sigils worked. The problem with Vengeance now is they have nerfed the crowd control of almost every single class, and then they have just randomly decided to buff Vengeance's crowd control through the fucking roof. For, like, absolutely no reason. So now, instead of Vengeance being a really interesting tank that has, you know, a cool damage rotation and a cool survivability setup, where, you know, you have to manage your souls and do damage to heal through frailty, now their entire survivability is just press soul cleave to build up stacks of frailty that have absolutely no interaction whatsoever. It's just a stacking damage reduction. And their rotation is also just press soul cleave because it feeds into everything else in your rotation. And then they have infinite utility. More so than any other class in the game, and more so than many classes combined. So it's just, they've made Vengeance good in the least interesting way possible. It's not fun. Like, Prot Warrior in BFA was really strong, but at least Prot Warrior in BFA was still, like, kind of interesting to play. I didn't play it just because it wasn't really my cup of tea, but it was at least a more engaging tank to play than Vengeance is now. And BFA tank design sucked ass. That's just how boring current Vengeance is. Yeah. It's suddenly the healer's fault when the bad tank explodes in the raid, yeah. Stories like this are why you keep the guides open while doing stuff. Awesome, I'm glad to hear it. I mean, I like telling fun stories like that. It's especially fun when I get stuff like that and I get to vent about, you know, the dumb shit happening. That way other people can share in my pain. You're glad they made you learn that stuff and wow, you're still kind of flailing? Yeah. But at the same time, think about it like this. In Final Fantasy, if WoW was like Final Fantasy, you would still be somewhere in fucking Heaven's Ward in terms of the amount of time that it takes to get into the game. So you would still have a lot left to learn. The only problem is that WoW drops you into the quote-unquote end game, and if you've played other games, you're conditioned to the end game being the point at which you've already learned everything that you need to learn, and now you just do the content. Whereas in WoW, it's like you reach the end game, and then there are multiple different levels of end game, and you still have a lot of different things that you need to learn in order to progress through those levels. So the design of it is a little bit complicated for people who are familiar with stuff like Final Fantasy. Yeah, you have 6 motherfucking sigils, but yeah, I think a lot of people will tell me, like, you know, they love Vengeance right now, and they don't understand why I hate it. But I think most people, when I explain my issue with Vengeance, because I love Vengeance as like a core fundamental idea, because it is the tank that I mained through all of Legion. I mained it for most of BFA, and I even played it in Aberrus back when it had really fun Sigil of Flame interactions with its tier bonus. And then they took away all of the things that actually had like a skill cap with Vengeance and just turned it into Soul Cleave spam into Sigil spam, which is, it's boring. And there's no like difficulty to min-maxing it, so I just have no interest in playing it. Like Brewmaster, I still learn new things playing Brewmaster, and I've already fucking gotten cutting edge like multiple times. It's a very involved tank, and while that makes it a little bit hard to approach for a lot of new players, it feels very rewarding when I'm like doing research into like what are the other top brewmasters doing, and I see something that another brewmaster is doing that I'm not, and I'm like, oh, that's really cool, I should try that. Because it is such a complicated tank, and it has like so many fucking buttons. But at the same time, the more buttons you have, the more room there is for skill expression. So. Thinking of what to roll for Remix, you watch my class tier list and you're thinking Windwalker or Havoc? Yeah, both good options. Definitely both good options. I mean, speaking personally, I'm probably going to start with Windwalker Monk again. I played a Windwalker Monk in the beta, and I will probably play Windwalker Monk, well, Windwalker and Brewmaster, Monk in general. Just because, at least for the very first character, Monk is the only class that has anything special in Pandaria. Namely, the Peak of Serenity teleport. And I mean, it's just nice. One of the other cool things about Peak of Serenity is there's a lot of, like, bronze that just floats in the air that you can just fly around and collect for free, and it's like, hey, you know, if it works, it works. So I definitely think that Monk is the best, quote-unquote, best class for Mop Remix, at least for your first one. But there isn't any significant difference. You'll be fine playing any of them. I still haven't decided what I'll level second or third. I might just level Druid because I like leveling Druids. Guardian Druid in retail, it's just fun to play. Same with Prop Paladin, so we'll see. But I plan on leveling a bunch of different characters, and we'll see how it all works out. You'll play Monk for the first time. Might be a pain for yourself and try to learn Brew. I think the nice thing about Brew is that a lot of the basic things about Brew, especially while you're leveling and you're getting the kit piece by piece, it's not too hard to understand. And that's why I think the best way to learn a spec is to like really play it and really try to understand it as you get different pieces of the kit. Because Brewmaster has a lot of very intuitive combos. Like Keg Smash combos into Breath of Fire. When an enemy is affected by your Keg Smash, they will be set on fire by your Breath of Fire. That is like a staple combo that you use your Brewmaster rotation very often, and it's very easy to understand. And the idea of like later on, you don't get it until much later, but Blackout combo, understanding that's probably the hardest part of Brewmaster, but understanding that your Blackout kick is one of your most important abilities and you want to weave it in between a lot of stuff, then you understand like, okay, well, Tiger Palm is my main single target damage dealer. So large groups of enemies, I always want to hit them with Keg Smash, get the debuff on them, and then hit them with Breath of Fire, get the fire debuff on them. From then, you want to keep using Keg Smash whenever possible because it does a lot of damage and it reduces your Brew CD, and Brews are your main form of damage mitigation. You have Celestial Brew, which gives you a shield, you have Purifying Brew, which clears your stagger, so Keg Smash feeds into both your damage rotation and into your defensive rotation. Or your defensive abilities. You don't really have a rotation per se. And then you have other stuff. Like I said, you have either Tiger Palm or you get Spinning Crane Kick. It's like, okay, well, when do I use Spinning Crane Kick? Well, Keg Smash has a cooldown. So if I'm facing a lot of enemies and I can't use Keg Smash, I'm probably going to want to use Spinning Crane Kick. and then eventually realize, oh, Blackout Kick hits 3 targets when I get what's it called? Shadowboxing treads. Well, then you want to weave in Blackout Kick to AoE. Now, the hard part is understanding when you have all 5 of these abilities together, and they all have relatively low cooldowns, which ones do you press in which order? And then the most complicated part of Brewmaster by far, right now, which is, in my opinion, a design problem that they have recognized. And it is actually going to be a lot better in the War Within. Brewmaster has a lot of cooldowns. And a lot of Brewmaster's cooldowns are not very intuitive to use. You have... the only one that's kind of intuitive is White Tiger Statue. You place it and it does AoE damage. Really straightforward. It doesn't have any other interactions. That being said, it's boring as shit, and it's gone in the War Within. Thank God. It adds nothing to our rotation. It just gives us another button to press. It's gone. Bone Dust Brew is a little bit interesting because it is a brew that gives us brew cooldowns. And that means that like its cooldown kind of resets itself, or its effect will reset its own cooldown over time. But the other weird thing about Bone Dust Brew is the most common talent that you run with it to empower it gives you a chance to get a free Bone Dust Brew proc sometimes, and that means that you need to make sure that when you are hard casting Bone Dust Brew, you check to make sure that you do not have a free one already active, because if you're using Bone Dust Brew when you already have one that you got for free, well, you're wasting uptime. So there's a lot of times where in my like rotation, I'm like, okay, this would be a perfect time to use Bone Dust Brew, and then I see that I already have a free Bone Dust Brew, and I'm like, I guess I just won't press it. But then I need to keep that in the back of my head. Like, you know, I need to find a spot over the next 10 seconds to fit Bone Dust Brew into my rotation, because at some point it's going to fall off. And I don't want Bone Dust Brew sitting off cooldown for a super long period of time. And I will be honest, I do not like Bone Dust Brew. But it is thankfully also gone in the War Within. I've heard mixed opinions on that. Some people did like it. Some people didn't. I personally thought it was just kind of whatever. It felt, in many cases, like just a pointless maintenance button. There was some intricacy, like I said, about, you know, if you get a free proc, but I just found that more annoying than anything. But Brewmaster has a lot of other interesting cooldowns that I like playing around. The 2 main ones, which are here to stay, I think, is Weapons of Order and Exploding Keg. I love Exploding Keg. That's my favorite Brewmaster cooldown. It's really fun to use. It does big AoE damage, but then the other thing that a lot of people don't realize for Exploding Keg is for like 1 to 2 seconds, I forget exactly how long it is, it might be 1.5 actually, for 1.5 seconds after you use Exploding Keg, all of your abilities will deal extra fire damage. So a lot of times if you watch me play Brewmaster, you'll notice that I'll Exploding Keg, and then even on a single target, I will use Spinning Crane Kick, because Spinning Crane Kick is a lot of little hits as you're spinning. Instead of using a single Tiger Palm and getting a proc of Exploding Keg, in that, you know, Spinning Crane Kick window, you're extra procs, so it adds damage overall. You trust the 69th best Brewmaster in the world. Yeah. Well, I think